We're going to begin tonight's meeting as we always do. Please rise, and we're going to have a prayer followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to say a prayer tonight. Recently I have two people that I care about who have lost loved ones. And I think that we all have been in similar situations in our lives. So let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us together, and thank you for this day, another beautiful day as only you can create. And thank you for the folks that you have sent to enlighten our lives and to shine some sunlight on us. And thank you for that sunlight that changes seasons. And thank you for the opportunities ahead of us. And thank you for so many of the wonderful things you provided us. Also, thank you for the people who protect us here and the people who protect us far away. Please give us wisdom. Help us to do your work here. Help us do your work as we leave here. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Paul, can you make sure the speakers are on outside? Thank you. Very good. Okay. Acceptance of the agenda. I would like to add a mayor's report under committee reports. I'd like to do that first. So I'm going to make that amendment. I hope somebody will second me on that. Second. Thank you. And Alderman Stamper, Chairman Skidmore. Which one of y'all? Alderman Stamper.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to add to the agenda Resolution 2017-33, which was passed tonight. Due to the timeliness of it, it was asked to be brought before the full board tonight. Dana is handing out a copy of that resolution, and so I move to add this to the agenda wherever you deem appropriate.
Should we put it K?
K sounds good.
K sounds good. Okay. A motion, a second on that. Actually, we need to vote on the first one. I apologize for that. All those in favor of adding a mayor's report, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. All those in favor of adding, Resolution 2017-33, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Darrell, Alderman Woodcock.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe the vast majority of the people in the room are here to hear item H. I would move that we move that to the top of the agenda and get on with it.
Okay, we have a motion to move that forward in a second from Alderman Waters.
Is that going to be just A1?
Is that moved to A?
We'll
A.
make that half A. We'll put it ahead of A. Alderman Skidmore, do you want to discuss this?
No, I do not. I'm on for one other thing.
Okay. All those in favor of moving H above A, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Alderman Skidmore?
And then I just need for time constraint, there's no problem with the second reading of ordinance 1728. I just need to pull that for one meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
You are the sponsor of that.
That is correct.
Okay.
Which one is that?
It's item B. Okay. Okay. We now have an agenda with 4 changes. All those in favor of accepting the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. We have no public hearings. Next, we have approval of September 12, 2017 meeting minutes. We have a motion and a second. Those in favor of approving the September 12, 2017 meeting minutes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Next, we have citizens' comments. Before I start reading names, I want to read something here. If you desire to address the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to make comments, submit a petition or voice a grievance, please sign here, and we have 16 people who did that. You will be required to limit your comments to 5 minutes. Speakers must identify themselves by name and address. Public comment shall be limited to 5 minutes per individual, which time is non-transferable to other speakers. All comments should be directed to the presiding officer, that's me, not to the alderman, city staff, or other members of the public. Comments must address issues, not individuals or personalities. Personal attacks shall not be tolerated. Comments may support or oppose particular issues or measures, but the motives of those with different views shall not be questioned or attacked. Malicious comments will not be allowed. First here is Jack Chappelle. Go ahead, Mr. Chappelle.
Honorable Mayor and Aldermen, I'm here to talk about the Forest Park development. This board and each of you as individuals is being asked to say yes to agree to a development that will enrich land speculators and make life poorer for residents up and down Saundersville Road, for residents whose children attend crowded station camp schools, and for those of us in neighboring communities who will suffer because a developer wants more than he is entitled to. He is asking for something that makes him rich and makes us poor indeed. As for the development itself, it is a bad design. Why has this development been exempted from state and city fire codes, requiring more than one access if a development has more than 30 homes? The public deserves to know why provisions of these codes are not being enforced, and even the staff report references that requirement, but it was apparently exempted because of the potential for future connecting streets at some point in the future, and who knows when that is going to be. It may never come about. Until then, all the traffic is going in and out of one entrance with one 11-foot entrance and one 11-foot traffic lane exit. Those are traffic lanes that it doesn't count the bike lanes or the sidewalk. The developer believes it is safe to have 653 houses with a potential of hundreds of people locked behind one entrance point. What if there's a major fire, a gas leak, a major crash, a tornado? Hundreds of people, families will be fleeing at the same time public safety officers are trying to reach the site through one narrow access way. This is contrary to the International Fire Codes, dated 2012, that the state of Tennessee has adopted, and is also the fire code that is cited in city codes. We ask that this plan be rejected, and that if it is resubmitted, that it comply with all codes. Future residents deserve no less. Others have addressed the traffic nightmare that this development will be a part of. It's not just congestion here and there and at that intersection. It will cause congestion up and down Saundersville Road. It will cause congestion at the intersections of Long Hollow Pike, Big Station Camp, and Highway 386. The study that the city sponsored was done in April 2017, and it shows the road is already congested, and this project is estimated to add 5,820 vehicular trips to that congestion. To partly mitigate the traffic problems that this developer will cause, he offers money. As Planning Commissioner Laura Atchley correctly noted, the money this developer offers is akin to taking 1 cup of water from a brim-full bucket and then replacing it with 2 cups of water. The traffic contribution generated by this one development will be horrible. 5,820 vehicular trips in and out, one access, and onto a road that is already a full bucket. Property owners and the developer have land which they bought or have rights to buy knowing its zoning. Estate rural zoning that would allow about 200 homes on that property, and that would be in character with the surroundings, and yet they ask for 653 houses, more than 3 times the permitted number, and at the high end of the maximum permitted under planned development. The developer touts 36% open space, and that looks okay when you look at a flat map. But if you look at a topo map, what you'll see is that the flatlands have been developed, and any space of over 17% grade
30 seconds.
is left open space. So the developer covers the good land with buildings and gets open space credit for poor and unbuildable property. I don't have time to go into it, but there are also issues related to historic cemeteries and Indian burial grounds on that property that I will write to the Board of Aldermen about. Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
time, sir.
Appreciate that.
Excuse me, Mayor, I did not get his address.
1758 Long Hollow Pike. I'll go ahead and read them for the rest of the meeting. Sandy Bergquist, 110 Kenton Loop.
Hello, and thank you for letting me speak. My name is Sandy Bergquist, and I've been a resident of Hendersonville, 110 Kenton Loop, presently for about 12 years. I've owned homes in neighborhoods directly off Saundersville Road and homes in other parts of our city and county. I've been following the Forest Park neighborhood development closely and attended the previous Planning Commission meetings, including the recent special committee meeting. I've also read most of the Stop Forest Park post. I've emailed each alderman and have also been able to speak briefly with some of you, as well as some of our senior city staff employees. I appreciate each one for listening to me and responding and helping us all understand the potential development. I'm not one of the parcel owners. I am not a statistician. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a developer or a builder. I'm simply an interested citizen who got curious about Forest Park and started listening, investigating, and asking questions. The voices of objection have been very loud and rallied well, but there are others who have opposing opinion that may feel overpowered and have not spoken up. I'm willing to step forward and say that I support Forest Park development, and I have 3 specific points that I would like to briefly speak about. Number 1, there hasn't been any focus or discussion on the potential tax revenue for the 653 homes. I recently completed some detailed research, fact-finding directly from our city and county government offices, and I've gained some very encouraging information. Given that the city and the county share road maintenance and improvement responsibilities and expenses for Saundersville Road, the additional homes in Forest Park would very significantly increase our property tax income for roads and schools, police and fire, and other city responsibilities. Last week, I emailed this information to each alderman. Presently, the Jenkins Farm and other parcels involved pay only $427 in City of Hendersonville tax revenue annually. However, based on the current Hendersonville tax rate and an approximate average of $300,000 for the 653 homes, the city would yield an annual tax revenue of $370,000. So it would go from $427 to $370,000. When I discovered that, it got my attention. More staggering is the county. The current annual county tax revenue of the 4 parcels involved is $5,500 roughly. However, based on the county tax rate, $300,000, the new county tax revenue would be $1.2 million. So from $500,000 to $1.2 each year. A grand total of $1.5 million of annual property tax revenue for our city and county versus $5,900. I've read some criticism from objectors that it's just about money. Well, yes, it is about money. If we don't get help for road funding and school improvements from this proposed property tax revenue, do we raise taxes instead? Number 2, the traffic has been the largest, loudest objection. If I understand correctly, and this contrary to what was just spoken about, I interpreted the traffic study that it would only be about a 10% increase on the traffic on Saundersville Road. I don't think that's significant. Living off Saundersville Road twice, I know there was congestion during the peak school hours, but that's much better now that they have removed the 4-way stop sign. We know that the county, this is an important part to me, we know that the county is busy approving and developing other new communities all around Saundersville Road. It's coming and it's happening. The other new communities that we have no control over, but will be using Saundersville Road. We have been told in previous meetings that we have 0 city or county road funds available right now or in the near future to complete any road improvements on Saundersville Road. There's been mention of a possible 1,500 homes, including Forest Park, being developed off Saundersville Road. Some of the potential home sites included are in established aged neighborhoods and neighborhoods without active builders and neighborhoods that may or may not really be completed to build out.
Ms. Bergquist, 30 seconds.
Wow. As we know, Forest Park is contributing $653,000 up front for a total of 1.3. Number 3, I think that the objectors are concerned about losing their country feel. Overcrowding schools is a concern. Most importantly, we have to acknowledge that the current ER zoning for those homes on Jenkins Farms, we will not get a single city tax dollar, and we will, as a city, have no voice on what they do with that property. There's no, the regulations for what the zone now and the regulations that the developer zoning is requesting is completely different.
Thank you. Kathleen Hawkins, 1008 Harmony Lane.
Hello, thank you. I'm here to speak not only as a resident of Hendersonville, but also the president and CEO of the Hendersonville Chamber. I want to emphasize that I have spoken with many business owners that are in this community, some who are afraid to come forward because they don't want to risk the chance of losing customers, but some who are advocates of growth because they're advocates and they understand that with rooftops come businesses. If you drive through the streets of Indian Lake right now, you'll see that several businesses are closing, several businesses are leaving. I'm working consistently with businesses like the Streets and every other business around town to really identify what their needs and how I can help and how I can support them. So I just ask that you take into consideration the businesses. As an advocate for our businesses, I ask that you consider 2 things. They are struggling right now because they have staffing problems, huge staffing problems. Almost every business in town is struggling finding the employees that they need. We need different types of rooftops in our community for all income ranges so we can recruit employees that can earn anywhere from $9 an hour to $100,000 a year or more. We also have a problem where we're getting new businesses coming into town specifically because of the growth that is anticipated. I've spoken with many. You see infrastructure's popping up all over. I've talked to the people that are coming. I've talked to Zoe's and McAllister's and K Jewelers. I had a conversation the other day. They're coming here because of that anticipated growth. So I just ask that you consider that if you want them to have the same signs that are hanging in many of the businesses that are going away because they came here for that growth a couple of years ago, I don't want that to happen. I want them to come here. I want them to thrive. And part of the way they can thrive and part of the way they can hire $9 an hour people and $90,000 a year people is with rooftops and growth. So growth is coming and we need to embrace it or they're going to skip over us and go to the next city. Thank you.
Kathleen, thank you. Julie Hull, 1715 Saundersville Road. Sure. You want to hand something out? Okay. Okay. We'll do it.
Okay, my name is Julie Hull, and I live at 1715 Saundersville Road. My family moved here to Hendersonville in 1976. I'm a graduate of Hendersonville High School, graduated with your sister and the mayor's sister, and I love this city and I feel very passionate about stopping this development. I feel that the previous administrators made some very bad choices when it comes to development and growth, and I hope we can learn from their mistakes and not repeat them. That's why a group of us decided to come together and fight this development. We started a petition, and to date we have over 780 signatures. Some of them are outside of our city, and some people who just love to protest signed it. So I tried to clean up those names and get out everyone who was not from Hendersonville, and so we have 609 signatures on that petition, which I will leave with you if you would like. There are a lot of issues with this development, but today I want to specifically speak toward the property tax issue that could be generated by Forest Park. This is information that I got from the Hendersonville, Tennessee website with the tax rates, and I valued the homes in Forest Park at an average of $350,000. The assessed value of that would be $87,500. So at the current tax rate, the annual property taxes generated would be $663 plus a trash fee of $284 for a total of $947 per house annually. With an average home price of $350,000 and the proposed 653 homes in Forest Park, that would generate approximately $618,554 in annual property taxes and fees. Also wanted to take into account the increased sales tax revenues that this development would generate. If you take into account that 60,000 residents generate an annual sales tax revenue of $12 million for the city of Hendersonville, we can estimate that each resident contributes approximately $200 a year. So with an average of 2.58 people per home, based on the 2015 census, Forest Park and its estimated 1,684 people will generate approximately $336,948 in annual sales tax revenue. If you add this to the property taxes and fees, the city will generate $955,502 from the Forest Park development. But now we must consider the cost of Forest Park to the city. Based on the city's $50 million budget and an estimated 60,000 residents, each resident costs the city $833 per year in city-provided services. Therefore, the Forest Park residents will cost the city $1.4 million. So Forest Park and its residents will create an annual deficit to the city of Hendersonville to the tune of approximately $450,000. So we are asking you to take this information into consideration when you think about saying yes or no to this development and how it's going to affect us. Another thing I want to ask you to consider is the bridge under the railroad tracks. I think before any more homes are approved on Saundersville Road, that needs to be addressed. And that is all I have.
Did you want to hand this petition?
Sure.
You want to start it down there? And that's fine. Okay, appreciate that. Gary Shea? Sharp, sorry about that. 1209 or 1709? 1709 Saundersville Road.
Yeah, Gary Sharp, 1709 Saundersville Road. I've lived there for about the last 12 to 15 years. As Julie said, I think it's going to cost the city money. I don't disagree that we need to continue development, but if I understand right from the Planning Commission meetings, the property is currently zoned for 1 to 3 acre lots. None of the opposition that I'm aware of has any problem with the 1 to 3 acre size as proposed. We do have major problems with trying to make it basically a condominium complex or something similar to Antioch. I think the residents of Hendersonville moved out here expecting something probably more in the, on the line of Franklin than Antioch, and nobody wants the development to be 3 and 4-plex homes. I think that's going to destroy the values in the area, and the traffic's already been addressed. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Milton Miller, sorry about that. Milton Miller, 1719 Saundersville Road.
That's right.
That part was easy.
My name's Milton Miller, 1719 Saundersville Road. I've lived at that address for going on 30 years. When I moved out there, it was just a little country town, a little country place. Conway Twitty had 200 acres across the street and had some of his exotic animals and so forth over there, but we've grown, and I understand that. But I think we've grown to the point of it's getting almost ridiculous. If you take 200 plus acres and you put 650 plus units on it, that works out to about, and then there's also all the green space that they talk about. Then this works out to a unit on about 1/4 of an acre. And I know they've talked about generating the revenue, but the cost, right now, the traffic is bad. If you, I think that one of the gentlemen on the planning committee had estimated it was going to cost between $9 and $20 million to rework Saundersville Road. Now, they had talked about putting in $750,000. Well, that's not very much considering what the total cost is going to be. And the school system is already full down at Station Camp. Somebody is going to pay for that. Are the developers of this property going to pay for the school system down over there? Because it's going to load up the schools. The fire department, it's not adequate to take care of that many more homes. And you know, they've painted this thing up to look so pretty. They've got, well, there's some of his pictures up there. And basically what they're doing is putting lipstick on a pig because it's going to be something that we're not going to be proud of once it gets in there. The guys that are doing it are nice guys. I like them. I mean, you know, you can't keep from liking them, but still, it's just not good for our community. And like was brought up a minute ago, it's already been approved for residential estate housing. And I think that, and I've been told it was approved. I don't know that for a fact, but I was told that it was. Well, that's 1 to 3 acre lots. And when I asked one of the gentlemen, won't call his name, but one of the gentlemen, I've asked him twice, I said, why can't you be satisfied with that? Don't get me wrong, I don't like it. I got 650, 700 feet of fence line that's going to border all of this because my property backs up to that. And he said, we can't make enough money off of it. Now, are y'all going to agree to vote this thing in so that they can make more money? It's all down to money. That's all it is. And I hope y'all will consider the people that are out there that have lived here, that have helped build this community up to what it is as of now, and vote this thing down. Thank you.
Mr. Miller, thank you. Becky Parsons, 1233B, Jenkins Lane.
Hi, my name is Becky Parsons. I live at 1233 Jenkins Lane. The development will be in my backyard. I appreciate your time and you listening to the voices of the community concerning this forest park. I'll try to make this short because no one really wants to be here again tonight. I know there are hopes that we would just give up, but we're not. We live in an area that is obviously desired. And I see why this land is wanted. It is beautiful, and it's a wonderful location. Mrs. Greer, who owns Jenkins Farm, she has a beautiful piece of land. I can't imagine being able to have land like this to raise my 3 boys. I also see the opportunity for the city for the revenue. This is a development that, if it was up for discussion 10 years ago, it might be okay. But now there's a lot of growth. Saundersville, Jenkins, Anderson, it is very saturated, and that's why we're here. We live here, or we have moved here for the beauty and location. I did not move to New York City, nor did I move to Westmoreland or even Franklin. We have chosen to raise our family here for a reason. But that reason is disappearing. Frustration is building. Growth can be good, but don't get me wrong. I'm not against growth. I'm not against change. But I think along with this and many others, it has come to a point where it needs to be stopped. It needs to be reevaluated. The revenue off of the developments can't continue to affect the ways of living in this community. Bigger is not always better. There are 20-plus subdivisions, along with apartments, townhomes, and villas in this area, that of which aren't even out of the first phase or even started. It's insane. Morning traffic and evening traffic are getting out of hand. This is not just my view or opinion. It is a vast majority of this area and community. And people my age have a lot of kids that are not able to attend this. And that's hard because I know this room would be packed. The saturation is crazy. Please look at the quality versus the quantity. Quantity will not keep Hendersonville top notch. There are many problems that come along with saturation and quantity. Traffic, education, flooding, crime, safety, and even sanity, to name a few. Though this may be in my backyard with 5 houses to my one, and it makes me sick, there is an even bigger issue and problem that I want to address and fight for, and that is education. I have been to several meetings now on this development, and neither the developer nor the committee have discussed schools. It has only briefly been mentioned, and to me, that's disturbing. The Station Camp schools are amazing. All 3 are run well due to the wonderful principals, teachers, and coaches. We are very spoiled to have a system like this. But daily, these teachers are trying their best to teach a large number of kids. 30+ kids in some classes is not ideal, nor teachable. The kids are herded between classes. There are up to 8 classes in a grade with 25+ kids. Kids are not being taught to the ability because it's not possible. The teachers are working their tails off. When you can't get a conference with a teacher on conference day because there are too many kids and not enough slots, there's a problem. I can't be frustrated with the teacher, but the ones that have allowed too much growth and haven't done it wisely. We have great teachers. We need to keep them. We chose the Station Camp schools for the education. We chose our house to go to Station Camp. I have 3 kids, and that is why I'm fighting this for their future. We will be in these schools for a while. Education is very important, and it should be one of the top reasons to slow the growth. Ask the teachers, not the developers. What is the reality in the classroom in the schools? The plan, the drawings for the development are impressive. They've done a really good job. But with splash pads and movies on the lawn, that's going to bring kids. The reality and a plan can be 2 different things.
30 seconds.
I would rather drive on a rough 2-lane road than to have extra 2,000 cars on a groomed road. Those cars are still going to go somewhere, and the kids are too. The roads are a problem, but not the real problem. It's the amount that travels near and on them. The entrance in and out, that's going to be a huge issue if there's only one. And if there's not just one entrance, all these roads connect in a landlocked farm. I ask that you try to see the community as a community and see the desires and concerns of it. I know revenue is important, but if there's only one good thing about the development, that's a problem.
Ms. Parsons, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Barry Breshnahan, 127 Country Hills Drive.
Thank you. I am Barry Bresnahan. I live at 127 Country Hills Drive. I've been there for 13 years. Prior to that, I was in Windcrest at 117 Huntington for 5 years. I'm here to support the Forest Park project. Traffic is not currently a disaster on that road. It was thick in the mornings going to school because all our kids do want to rush in there with their vehicles. Since they've taken the stop sign down, it is a breeze to get over to Station Camp in the early hours of the morning. The contribution that is being offered for road improvement is approximately 10% of one of the estimates that I've seen from this report, which I think y'all are aware of. It's 5% of another report. So those numbers are fairly high in contribution as to what they're asking for. Developing property is a business. Hendersonville is a growing town. Businesses are coming here, whether they be Macy's, Panera Bread, the guy that sells washers, nails, sheetrock, what have you. It's a business. We need business in Hendersonville to support Hendersonville. We don't just need homes. The building of homes is a business. Many of us in the community have small businesses or have been involved in small businesses, and we rely on these things to continue the growth. Nashville is slated as one of the largest, fastest growing metropolitan areas in the nation. We need to react appropriately. The county has secured land for future schools. Based on the number of homes that are going in there, and a conversation I had with Benny Bills some 10 or 12 years ago, the estimate is approximately 15% of the homes will provide a child to the school, which in my quick math tells me that that's about 25 or so children per class, per grade. which is one classroom. If we're already at 8 and we build another school, we're comfortably at 4 or 5 per school. The homes that this developer is proposing is what the market is buying. We're an aging society. We're aging. There will be a day that I downsize from my home at 127 Country Hills. I looked at the properties over at Millstone for my mother-in-law and father-in-law. The offerings are very appropriate, and these homes that they're offering are very comparable. The developments that they've been associated with are of high end, of high quality, and high demand. The builders that they have on verbal agreement to build in there are local, reputable builders that will, again, buy local, use local talent if it's offered, and therefore we need to consider the business transaction of this development rather than the feelings of a little bit more traffic or the belief that we're going to overcrowd schools. Change isn't easy. But until we change our view, positive change with appropriate decisions cannot be made. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bresnahan. Stephen Rozek, 110 South Lawrence Way.
Yes, Stephen Rozak, 110 South Lawrence Way. Thank you, Mayor Clary and Alderman, for giving me this time. I've heard a couple of people speak about the traffic is no problem. I'm 100% against that. We have lived in Hendersonville for 4 years, and in that time, one development that came up on Saundersville Road was Millstone. As soon as Millstone came to near completion, my wife and I both noticed a lot of traffic. We live in Windcrest Development. Coming out of there, we've noticed a lot of traffic. The other traffic problem that we have seen is the lack of the tunnel underneath the railroad tracks. That has been on the books, talked about, rumored about, nothing has happened. Numerous times during the day, you can see traffic back up because of the railroad at the crossing by Winston Hills, by Thornton's gas station. And during the traffic backup that backs up onto the interstate, onto Veterans Memorial, at what point are we going to deal with the traffic problem because of the no tunnel and the extra traffic coming down Saundersville Road, coming into the congested area right there, crossing over to East Main Street? I'm looking at, we're going to have probably a fatal accident on Veterans Memorial Parkway because of the backed up traffic. Once the people get onto the exit ramp and back up into the slow vehicle lane, this is where the problem's going to be. You're going to say, I don't know what I'm talking about. I worked as a state trooper in Connecticut for 20 years. I did accident reconstruction. I can see the problems with the roadways. I know we've had a traffic study. I haven't read it, but I can see the lane widths, et cetera, are not adequate for the number of cars and traffic that we're proposing with the Forest Park development. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Rozak, thank you. Stephen Rose, 1721 Saundersville Road.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Stephen Rose, 1721 Saundersville Road. I think we all understand that the city of Hendersonville is attractive and growing. That is a wonderful thing for our community. It's a wonderful thing for our citizens. However, what we want as we grow is responsible growth. We want to be able to support the things that we do. We want to see the infrastructure in place before it's a nightmare and before it's a major challenge as it's proposed to be. This is roughly a $250 million development. They're good businessmen. They want to make a profit, and I don't think any of us have a problem with business or them wanting to make a profit. We understand those that want to sell the property for their own family's that have been here for years that may benefit from it because they've been here so long that it will now turn something nice for them. We don't have a problem with that either. Responsible growth is good growth. However, our roads are already grossly inadequate. They need an immense amount of repair, even as they are. By the own city's reports, there's an immense amount of work that needs to be done. Regardless of any other additional traffic or even the completion of the communities that are currently being constructed there. We know that there are issues coming off of the 386, getting across the tracks. That problem really needs to be addressed before there are significant fatalities. And we don't need to be a community that necessitates fatalities before we come to action. Action needs to take place first. The Planning Commission has recommended a no to this development. I echo that sentiment. There are issues that need to be resolved before anything can take place. I don't think anyone is opposed to the original zoning as it is today for 1 to 3 acre lots up to about 200 homes. While we may not like it, we understand that that is growth and that will happen. The open space that they've touted so well is not a magnanimous move. Most of it is topographically area that they cannot do anything with. In some of the earlier plans, they had other little sublet cul-de-sacs that were removed coming off of Country Hills because they weren't appropriate and would create confusion for our emergency personnel that may have to address it. Being in Forest Park, but not really in Forest Park because you had to access it some other way. We need infrastructure with police and fire. Right now, the station is across the tracks. Obviously, I've already said some about the tracks, but if there's something major, how much will burn or how much crime will happen before our personnel, our good, hardworking personnel, can even get there? Even doing their best because they get caught behind. The proposed allotment of 653 homes is irresponsible growth. Like I said, I think everyone is for responsible growth, but the 653 is irresponsible. We need to solve the problems before we grant further approvals. I know that there are many that would probably speak up here as well if they weren't perhaps afraid of public speaking, or perhaps not really sure how they would be responded to. They might even want to show their hands as to who would oppose it as well because they're afraid to get up there here themselves. If they'd like to do that, that's up to them. But ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you will consider the real issues that need to be solved, and then let's responsibly solve them so that we can increase the value of our community, increase the value for our landowners and our property owners, and help us to all move forward together in a unified way with the things that we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Did the petition make its way down that way? It needs to come back this way. Thank you. Neil Harris, 242 West Main Street.
Hello, I'm Neil Harris. I'm currently serving as the president of Hendersonville's Fraternal Order of Police Lodge. I just wanted to speak to you briefly tonight about the second reading of the ordinance on change to the employee pay schedule, and just say first of all that I appreciate you on first reading voting to approve that. From speaking with our members, which are Hendersonville police officers, it is important to them that their pay dates and their pay amounts stay the same. I believe that after looking at this, I know a lot of the concern has been about $250,000 that would have to be spent to appropriate 5 days' pay. And after looking at it, it doesn't seem to me that that money would need to be spent. On the pay date, that whenever this is implemented, let's say it is implemented, on the pay date it's implemented, the reason for giving city employees 5 extra days' pay my understanding, is to make sure we're not shorted 5 days' pay, right? So when you give 5 days' pay, the result in that pay period is going to be us being paid the same amount that pay period that we would have already been paid. The other 23 pay periods in that fiscal year are going to be the same as well. So the resulting pay or salary for each city employee that fiscal year is going to be the same of what you've already budgeted, meaning that you've already budgeted the amount to cover that 5 extra days' pay when you make that change to the pay schedule. So basically, I just wanted to, in summary, just throw that out there. From looking at it, that's what it looks like to me. I don't see where $250,000 would need to be appropriated to do it. I don't see how any money would need to be appropriated in this budget or any future budget in order to accomplish that, and I would appreciate your vote on behalf of FOP to push it through. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Appreciate that. Let's see. Ed Greer, 341, boy, I can't read that. Wombley Boulevard?
Boulevard, Tennessee.
Okay. Mr. Greer, thank you. Coming up.
My name is Ed Greer. I'm privileged to be the husband of Betty Jenkins Greer, who is half owner of the Jenkins property. I have been on that property ever since I have been married to her, and there's no Indian burial ground on it. There is an old cemetery at one end of it, but that is taken care of. Several years ago, when the city of Hendersonville annexed that property into Hendersonville, we did not want to be annexed into Hendersonville, but they told us how great it would be if that property was annexed, that the property would be more valuable to be home sites than farmland. So here we are today discussing whether it can be developed or not. Why shouldn't it be developed? Why shouldn't it come home sites? Scott Foster was the mayor then, and the time it was annexed into the city, said that we would make a whole lot more for home sites than we would cutting timber and running cattle. So I am going to speak to every member of this Hendersonville City Council. Do what you said you would do for us. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Mr. Greer. Danny Bryan, 1929 Hampton Pike, Lebanon.
Danny Bryan. I am the husband of Susan Rice Bryan, who is also owner of the property. As Mr. Greer said, the city of Hendersonville met with Mr. Griffin, my father-in-law, and my Aunt Betty, and ensured them that annexation was the right thing to do and that it would provide an easier opportunity for the property to be developed. I don't see that going on here. Now, if you look at myself, and then there's another owner, John Griffin, who can't be here. He's in Newport. That's where he lives. All of us live out of town. We are not on the property. We can't police the property. And if you look at me, you see I'm getting long in the tooth. I'm not going to farm anymore. I've been a farmer. I've done that. It's hard. Not going to do it anymore. Now, the property is zoned agricultural. Now, if this development does not go through, This property is going to be sold one way or another. It's going to be sold for development, and we have a real estate agent, Millard Bridges, who has other clients interested in the property. One that is in serious consideration right now is Tyson Farms, are interested in putting in a poultry facility. Now, one way or another, we're going to sell this property. Do we think the poultry farm is the way to go? I don't. I think Forest Park development is much more desirable than having chicken houses on the property. But like I said, we are not farming anymore. The property is going to be sold. Now, the liability issues, we've had fences cut. We had fences cut, a gate was put on, and there's been illegal trespassing with four-wheelers on the property. We can't be there to police that. We've had people drive on the property and dump trash. There is a boat on that property. A boat I don't own, I didn't own. Somebody drove on that property and dumped a boat on it. Now, we're responsible for that. Cattle have come up missing. Now, I've been in cattle farming, and I know they tear down fences and they get gone, but that's not the result here. Now, something else, population is not static. Population's growing. You look at the news, 90 people move into Nashville every day. That's not sustainable. They're going to move out. And they're going to move out in surrounding territory. Traffic on roads, not static. Okay? More cars are coming. Now, these guys have offered an opportunity to help Saundersville Road, improve it. I'm also a teacher. I see the growth going as well. Human population is not static, it's growing. My classes have gone from 20 students in a classroom to 50. Yes, it's a problem. But it's a good problem to have. I've got job security. Okay? The farm is not a park. Sure, it does provide a pastoral scene. It is calming to see cattle walking around unless you have to work them. Nothing like worming cattle, if any of you have ever done it. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore. But something else about being long in the tooth, I'm getting tired of mowing the lawns. I don't want to take care of an acre lot, and people moving into the area do not either. So having smaller yards is desirable. I want to thank you all for at least listening to the family on our side of the situation and giving us an opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Bryan, thank you. Steve Searles, 103 Withers Court.
Hi, my name is Steve Searles. I live at 103 Withers Court, which is Saundersville Station. I've lived there just 2.5 years. I used to live off a Long Hollow Road here in Hendersonville. I was at the meeting last week, the Capital Projects Committee meeting, where we had a presentation by the engineer who had what I considered great graphs and charts, and was enlightening to me to see and understand the road conditions, you know, with Saundersville Road and the necessity of the road improvements. They talked about 5 years out, 10 years out, 15 years out, all of those things that are going to be necessary in the future. If this project does not get passed, those things still exist. They don't really change. It just maybe means that we're further down the road as far as time. I have actually changed my mind. I initially have opposed this project, but I stand here tonight after really thinking and considering the monies that the city is going to get for the improvements of the road, the infrastructure, and I feel like that is going to be a positive thing for us. I think it's hard not to consider that as a strong part of why we should go ahead and approve this. I do have concern with the number of residences. The 653 is a lot, in my area, and of course, we've got the Goodall Millstone housing development going on. But I do think the infrastructure of the roads is something that the developer and the city have come together to make it something that's feasible. And anyway, I do think because of that, that's something that we really have to strongly consider as an approval of this. I do have concern about schools. I did downsize. I have one of those small properties that I can mow very simply. I don't have the big property I had off of Long Hollow. I don't have kids in the school anymore. But school systems certainly are important, and I do think that's another consideration that needs to take place, but I realize that's not part of your responsibility here. Anyway, I'm actually for it now. Thank you.
Mr. Searles, thank you. Russ Wright, 300 Indian Lake Boulevard.
Good evening. First of all, thank you all for taking the time, and I also would really like to applaud the citizens who have already spoken. I feel like the majority of the points on both sides have probably been covered pretty thoroughly in this. I am here to maybe give a little bit of a different viewpoint of this. As a new business owner inside of the city of Hendersonville, this is a project that we have been watching and keeping up with the community response. To echo some statements that were made previously, I do think there is a large contingency of business owners, particularly small business owners like myself and my partner that's own a business in the streets of Indian Lake, that are concerned about speaking up. They're concerned about some ramifications because of the polarizing nature of this. But for us, it's really about Hendersonville as a community that we love. It's really what drew us here was this city, my experience when I first moved to Middle Tennessee, being lucky enough to land in Hendersonville and being a part of this, now owning a business and quite honestly being very impressed with the way that this entire community has supported us from day one. And that started with the chamber, that started with this council, and it's something that we want to be able to be a part of this community, help provide our tax dollars, our support for the school system, for this city, and watch it continue to grow in the proper way. Again, I think most of these points have been covered. One thing I would like to bring up is I do feel that Hendersonville is fortunate to have a developer and a builder that is local to this community. My personal experience growing up in a small community outside of a city in East Tennessee, very similar to what Hendersonville was when I moved here 13 years ago. And we did not have local development going on. We had to rely on the national builders, people that came in, and as a couple of people have shared, I grew up working on a farm as a child. So I think that the opportunity to have a local business that is based here, many of the principals grew up here, is a strong consideration that you need to make. For us as a small business, this is obviously a big concern for us. We watch the population changes, and I think everyone's acknowledged that Hendersonville is a rapidly growing area. It's a very desirable community for people throughout Middle Tennessee, particularly those that are trying to flee what's going on in Nashville and find a community that they can settle into. Those residents that are moving here are looking for a particular type of home, and many times that is a more controlled, a smaller lot, something that's easier to manage. And with the way that lifestyles are changing, populations are changing, I think that's going to be crucial. So I'm here to speak again from the standpoint of owning a small business that relies on population continuing to grow. We certainly opened up our business here based upon the projected growth, the projected development, and the continued enrichment of this community. So I hope that you'll take my opinion into consideration as you make these decisions, and we certainly support this development going through. Thank you.
Mr. Wright, thank you. Next on the agenda is committee reports. The mayor's report, very, very brief. Earlier today, I signed my name many, many times as part of our bond issuance. And then later on, after I did that, we were wired $5,793,025. So we have that bond money available now. We'll have a ordinance coming forward. About how to spend that money, most of which was designated ahead of time in our budget process. So. Oh yeah, and you all have a copy that's in your packet here that explains the bond issue. Finance Committee, Alderman Stamper. Vice Chairman Stamper.
Thank you, Mayor. The Finance Committee met this evening. We looked at ordinance 2017-36 appropriating capital project funds, the amount of $5,793,025, which you just alluded to. That was recommended to the board. Resolution 2017-33 authorizing the transfer of $150,000 from disposal service tipping fees line item budget to a new line item budget titled Pilot Recycling Program within the Disposal Service Department. Those were monies to fund those neighborhoods that were testing the recycling in Hendersonville to see the response that we get on offering recycling. So that was also recommended to the full board for approval. Resolution 2017-34 to declare surplus, to declare equipment owned by the city to be surplus property and directing disposal of same. We recommended to the board to approve that. We went over some other items. Our IT director talked about some upcoming projects involving our website and some internal IT stuff. And I don't know, exactly how to talk in that type of language, but there's some exciting things going on behind the scenes with computers. Review budget overage report. There were a couple line items, but nothing significant. Good news on our revenue forecast for the 5th straight month. We have tipped over $1 million in collections on sales tax. All 3 months in this fiscal year, we're up over $1 million collected. So exciting news there. This concludes my report, Mayor.
Appreciate that, Vice Chairman Stamper. General Committee, Chairman Sprouse.
It was previously reported items E, F, G, I, and J on tonight's agenda have been reviewed and have received positive recommendation from the General Committee. Item H is a new one, and that's having to deal with Forest Park, and that received neither a positive nor a negative recommendation from General Committee. It comes to you with General Committee with no recommendation at all, either way. And that's our report.
Chairman Brown, Public Safety. Thank you.
No
Thank you, Chairman
report, Mayor.
Sprouse. Thank you, Chairman Brown. Chairman Skidmore, Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I will, due to the length of the agenda tonight, I want to keep it simple, so I'm going to go only to the board. We'll review some other things in 2 weeks, but we've got a lot of things going on in Public Works, as we always do. But tonight in your agenda, we have the Resolution 2017-33, and that is the authorization of transferring our disposal service tipping fees of $150,000 to a new line item. And that line item is we're getting ready to start which I'm very proud of this, the Public Works Committee for several years now has been wanting to start, along with the approval of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen here, a recycling program for the city of Hendersonville. And what this is right now is the first step, and I would ask this board for unanimous consent on this resolution to approve it, because what this ordinance is the beginning of a recycling program or a pilot program for the city of Hendersonville. What this will do, and then I will close with it will determine whether the city and its people are ready for recycling for Hendersonville. We have about 5 subdivisions or so that we have chosen to do the pilot program in, and this will dictate what our next steps are. This program, board members, is going to be about a 6-month program, so we'll know next year. We'll probably know actually in Public Works a little before then of how it's going and what we're going to do with the recycling if it's a success in Hendersonville. And we will be giving monthly reports and updates on the program if this is approved tonight. So that's all I can really say about it tonight, and we would ask for you all to support this resolution that we will be voting on this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Chairman Skidmore, thank you. Chairman Campbell, Capital Projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Capital Projects Committee met September the 21st at 5 o'clock. We had a lengthy agenda. First item was Fire Hall number 2. They're surveying the site at this time and are assembling the design and build team at this present time. Volunteer Park at Arrowhead, Phase 2 has received a grant of $500,000, so we can move forward with that park. And we've had discussions regarding Health Department site. The senior citizens property over there on the Imperial Park, I guess is a good way to describe it. That appraised value of the property come in at $150,000 per acre. We're sort of waiting on the county commissioners to come up with an offer to the city of Hendersonville because they'd like to build possibly a health department there. The railroad underpass at Winston Hills, that was a question earlier, the local interchange connector. We're waiting on the NEPA phase, which is the environmental approval from the state of Tennessee to move forward with the design of that project. So it's in the process. It's just going through the approvals of environmental impact and things of this nature. Drakes Creek and Stop 30 is in the design phase at this time. The traffic signals, waiting for the state to approve our advertisement. I mean, the state's involved in everything we do, folks. Walton Ferry and Old Shackle Island Road realignment. This project's been talked about for 30 years. It is moving forward. The state has already started surveying Walton Ferry Road. You'll see them out there from Noakes Drive to Imperial as survey crews are out there right now. And Forest Park was on our agenda as well. We had a long conversation and discussion with engineers and other people, city planning, and we came back that this is just something being talked about. It's not really for capital projects to discuss because it's not a project within the city of Hendersonville, even though there's a large dollar amount being talked about. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes my report.
Chairman Campbell, thank you. Alderman Petrelli, Planning Commission.
No report.
Thanks. Alderman Woodcock, Hendersonville Horizons.
No report.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, under ordinances resolutions, we have moved up item H. And this is first reading of ordinance 2017-34. This is an ordinance rezoning Forest Park property located west of Saundersville Road, north of Spyglass Way, and approving a preliminary master development plan to govern the development of said property. Alderman Petrelli? A motion and a second. Keith Free, I'd like for you to start us off, please. This is our planning director.
Thank you, Mayor. You have before you tonight the Forest Park.
Oh, sorry, Keith.
Yes, go ahead.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay. You have before you tonight consideration of the Forest Park subdivision plan development. This is coming to you from the Planning Commission. At the last Planning Commission meeting, this has been on several Planning Commission meetings over the last 4 months. And the Planning Commission did make a recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to deny the application. And I think everybody's probably pretty familiar with it, and I'm certainly open as we progress to any questions that you would have for me. I would just, one thing I would advise at such time, if we get to the point where someone's making a motion, I would advise, since there's been a lot of activity and interest in this, it would be good that whatever your motion may be, that you would include that it is in conformance with the land use plan. This would be an important thing to include in any motion, whether that would be a favorable motion or a negative motion.
We may come back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Keith. Alderman Hedberg.
Thank you, Mayor Clary. Am I on?
Yes. Yep.
Guess I'm sitting away from where I usually sit. First of all, I want to say thank you to every one of you, everybody sitting here, to take the time to come out and address us with regards to your concerns to this. This is probably the hardest decision right here that I've made so far. I've never received so many emails, so many phone calls. I've never spoke to so many people. And I'm glad to see the faces, and hopefully after this I can put some of the names to the faces. I applaud you for getting up and speaking, especially Mrs. Parsons. I understand, I've been there, in the exact same position. You're so passionate. And I totally understand that, and I appreciate you getting up. It's not easy to get up and speak in public, and I'm not a very good public speaker, easy. I've gone over and over and over this in my head, and every single point that was made tonight, I agree with every single one of them. The points that were for, the points that were against, the business that we need to bring into the city, taxes that we're going to make or may not make. Unfortunately, no matter how I think about this, I was voted to do the work for the people, period. And near on 60 phone calls and only 5 emails in my email box were for this. I have to consider that. I seriously have to consider that. And I just cannot go to sleep at night if I vote for this, because when I campaigned, one of the things that I said, and I made clear to people, that I am here to do the work for you. You guys put me here. You voted for me, and I promised to you that I would vote what way you wanted me to vote. I'm just one person. I can't vote because I like it. I think it's a fantastic project. I applaud the fact that we've finally got some local builders. Hindsight be 20. Had we have had Chip Moore and Keith Free on where they were today 20 years ago, I don't think we'd be sitting in the position we are as a money-poor city today. Again, thank you very much. I cannot vote for this tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Hedberg, thank you. Alderman Strauss.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the comments, appreciate the emails, everyone who's in attendance tonight. There has been a great diversity of opinion expressed to me in every method that it could be expressed. And one thing I always say is I'm glad that people watch us and watch the process, and may not always agree with every opinion and every decision, but hopefully you can respect the process and the way the decisions are being made. Just to address a few of the comments that were made as citizens' comments. We live in a free market society. We live in a capitalist society, and people are going to make investments in land, and they're going to make money on those investments. And unless someone went out and built their own house, they live in a house that someone made a profit off of. And that's just the reality of it. And that house was built because the person who built it or the company that built it wanted to make a profit off that investment. We heard a little bit about talking about how the upper levels of the development are leaving the trees, and it's the ridge lines and the heavy grade. That's desirable. That's highly desirable in development. In fact, that's something that I ask for when I talk to developers of other projects. I like the Maples. There's some very good homes in the Maples, but one of the things that I regret about the Maples, a subdivision that was approved before I think I was even old enough to vote, much less hold office. If you look, one of the failings I think of that subdivision is the ridge lines have been developed. And so it's highly desirable that if you want to maintain a suburban feel, a natural feel, that those are the parts that are not developed. And you can look at some parcels and some properties around Hendersonville where they have gone to very, very steep grades and have found ways to build on it. And not only does it make a less than desirable lot for the person who lives there, it makes a much less than desirable view for someone who has to live across the street, or in some cases, someone who lives a mile away. And when they look over to the horizon, instead of seeing a line of trees, they see a line of roofs. And when you see those surrounding you, that affects what you have going on. The school zone traffic, it's going to be bad around a school zone. Go to Ellis Middle School, which is in my ward, at the corner of Gallatin Road and Indian Lake Road, and you will see traffic backed up so much that it affects traffic on Gallatin Road. Hendersonville High School is the same way. Indian Lake Elementary School, The road's it's across the street from my ward, but the roads is in my ward. We can't design roads to handle short-term burst events like school letting out. Unless we started to mandate that parents use the buses that are made available to them. We have a lot of parents who drop off their kids and pick up their kids. And that's the way it's going to happen. But the rest of the time, we're going to be in a pretty good situation. The idea that these homes, this development, I appreciate the math that went into the projection of what the revenue and cost would be for this development. And we could go into long spreadsheets and explain how those numbers really don't add up, but I can just give you one premise. The average home in Hendersonville is not even valued at $200,000. If you have a premise that says, and with the average home in Hendersonville being less than $200,000, we're able to make our budget every year. We do not operate at a deficit. Some years we actually have a little bit of a surplus. If you take that number and go to almost twice that number, the assumption of $350,000 average home, then those are going to be properties at a value they're going to be paying more towards the tax base than the average home in Hendersonville right now. So if we're looking at over $400,000 deficit over a group of homes that are averaging $350,000 apiece, we would be bankrupt within a year or two with homes at $180,000 and $190,000 apiece being the average for the Hendersonville marketplace. So really, if these homes can't carry their weight on the tax base, current homes in Hendersonville on average can't carry their weight on the tax base. Part of this has to do with just the history of the area. I'd line as make as everyone who lives in Hendersonville got here as soon as they could. Some of us made that decision as an adult. Some of us made that decision after we retired. I was very fortunate. I was brought to Hendersonville as a babe in arms from family. My dad grew up in Robertson County. My mom's from Madison. So I've only known Hendersonville. But I also have known that road as a lane and a half wide gravel road. That when you cleared some of those hills that aren't there anymore, you had to sound your horn or flash your lights so you'd make sure there wasn't a car coming on the other side. And I haven't been driving that long. I'm not as old as I look. But we've heard these arguments before about keeping the feel of the community and keeping the feel of the neighborhood. And I've heard that before I was even on the board. And it was when folks started going out there and buying on 1 and 5 acre lots from the people who had 60 and 70 and 80 and 200 acre lots that they were working. The change in the community was when you went from land that people lived on and worked to you went to land where people bought a smaller portion of it and they worked somewhere else. So it's amazing to me, a lot of these addresses that I've heard tonight, those that have been that are in the city, I've heard similar debates and similar comments made when those very homes were approved to be built, when those areas were annexed into the city. So we're really not changing anything. It's a continuum that we're going on before. I have family and friends who have lived on that road and in neighborhoods that have been built off that road for decades and still live there. And I trust, and the changes in schools, people who lived at the far north end of Saundersville Road not too long ago went to Hendersonville High School and went to Nanny Berry Elementary, just to show you how much of a change that's taken place there. I don't know all of the plans that our school system has for growth, but I know the people who plan for that growth, and I know the methods that they use, and I trust that they are aware of this because they've told me that they're aware of this, and I trust that the building program that they have in place is taking into account developable land into the city. It really just comes down to the idea for me, and the process is a yes vote or a no vote is what is the better option for the people who live in the area, for the people in Hendersonville in general, and specifically for me as an alderman for Ward 2, what is best for the people who live who I represent in Ward 2. And I have seen a pattern of growth in this area without there being a pattern of revenue being generated. No impact fees, Station camp schools were built before the school system had an impact fee. These homes will be paying fees towards the county to help with the school system. They are offering to pay money for the city for helping with roads improvement. But those have been roads and schools that have been improved for new residents with the tax dollars paid by existing residents. And if we have an opportunity to take impact fees when people have been asking for impact fees, for us to collect impact fees, we should take them. If we have an opportunity to plan for growth and infrastructure and a way to pay for it when people have been asking us to pay for, to plan for infrastructure ahead of time and to pay for it ahead of time, we should do it. That's really what it is. Because this $600,000 up front and $1 million whatever it is over the course of the project isn't just money that's going to benefit the people who live along Saundersville Road or north of Saundersville Road, people who live in the county who will be coming to Hendersonville using this as a route. This will be benefit people throughout Hendersonville. This will benefit the people in my ward who are served by Walton Ferry and Saunders Ferry and Cherokee and Indian Lake roads that need improvements. And if we can get $600,000 up front and over $1 million over the life of the project to fix Saundersville Road as it grows, that frees up money to come to the roads that serve Ward 2 and folks who have lived there for decades. Now, what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is I had the opportunity to have some discussions with our staff, with the applicant, and then also the opportunity to ask them some questions in a meeting last week, which really went a long way towards me making my decision. And Keith, if you don't mind, I'd like to repeat a few of those questions, if we could do that. A lot of this is, I know, is going to be a negotiation between our staff, the professional planners, and the people who are asking for a change in planning regulation. And there's never going to be any type of negotiation. No one's going to get everything they ask for. But can you give us a little bit of an idea of what the significant request your staff's made that have first been accepted by the applicant and any that have not been accepted? Is there anything left on the table you'd like to see fixed?
There's been several things, I think, and we talked about this in the capital projects committee. But some of the things that have been issues from the planning staff have been the one way in, one way out. That the size of the road that's coming in is bigger than a typical road would be into a neighborhood, and they've kind of worked that out with the fire department and with the city engineer's office. That they were acceptable with that. Typically from planning, we like to see multiple ways in and out of a subdivision. One of the things they did do to address that is initially I think they had 2 access points. One was the east-west collector that's going to be constructed through the development, and then they had another stub out, but they added 3 more stub outs to where if future land developed outside of what they own, that a street system could possibly extend to address that. That's one issue. The other issues are the issue with the conservation subdivision development, which allows the density that we're talking about and is compliant with the land use plan. Just discussion about that over the last several months about whether that meets the spirit of that. It's kind of an area where the clarity of interpretation isn't really clear on it, what that really is, and trying to balance the quality of the open space and dedicated vistas that are in conservation areas that remain versus the quantity, and kind of balancing that out. Some things that were changed through that process that increase the amount of open space and sort of that vista of the more elevated areas with the tree lines was off of Country Hills, where there were a couple of stub outs that initially we were wanting connectivity, a way to get the other road in from those stub outs, but with topographical issues, and then it would get rid of that whole tree line kind of vista that we didn't pursue that. Plus the folks that live in that adjoining neighborhood didn't want that connectivity. So then that had those turned into cul-de-sacs, and then those cul-de-sacs were removed because the adjoining neighborhood didn't want that to happen. So the developer doing that did increase from originally what was submitted as far as the amount of open space and what that vista would be. So that did increase. One of the things through the process is, as we're all aware, there's difficulty on Saundersville Road with traffic, and we know, regardless, even without this development, there's going to be more traffic challenges on Saundersville Road. So one of the things was looking at what would be a fair way to calculate what an off-site improvement is. So when we have like a planned development like this is proposed, then we can have a negotiated kind of off-site planned off-site road improvement of what per lot cost would be. We've done that historically with with places like, started originally with Mansker Farms actually a long time ago, and more recently with Durham Farms, Fountain Brook, Norman Creek, Ivy Point, and we had the $1,150 total per lot fee. That was something that, you know, trying to get our hands around that, and so then I worked on and was supported by the city engineer's office in coming up with the 2,100 that we've talked about with with I think it's about 1.37 million that they would pay for off-site improvements. And one thing that was quite a bit of gap from what I think what the developers came in and were kind of thinking was, hey, they'll just do the 1,150 like the other developments have done. So I think they came in assuming that. But when we calculated that, and with the 2,100, it was a pretty steep jump from what I think they certainly were thinking. Additionally, I felt, and I thought it. I didn't know that the developer would accept it, but I felt very strongly that with the needs of the transportation improvements on Saundersville, we didn't just need to get some money, we need to get some money in a very short period of time. So one of the things that I proposed that the Planning Commission and the developer did actually end up agreeing to it was to paying $2,100 per lot, and that we get $1,000 per lot, which would be $653,000 up front when they for all the lots when they actually get their final approval, so that we could start making some of those significant improvements. So overall, that's kind of some of the things that we had been expecting, and some of the major issues, and how the developer has addressed some of those different things. Some of the other issues that were issues were we're looking at the amount of density. With this being a plan, SR1 plan development, then you could have up to 25% of the units could be townhomes or villas, and so they were maximizing that as well. That never changed throughout the whole process. They stuck with that 25% throughout the whole thing. I hope that addresses a little bit of it.
Thank you, Keith. One of the things that concerned me, and we talked about in the first Capital Projects Committee meeting, was the nature of Saundersville Road compared to so many other roads in Hendersonville. And I mentioned the four main roads, collector roads that serve my ward, Walton Ferry, Saunders Ferry, Cherokee, and Indian Lake. And what is similar in all of those and dissimilar from Saundersville Road is they're essentially terminal roads. They run until you get to the lake. There is no through traffic unless you're coming with a boat. Saundersville Road is more like New Shackle Island, in that we could tonight, if it was even feasible, say that there will never be another spade of dirt turned in the city of Hendersonville in that area. But we're still going to experience growth because of what's going to happen just a little bit north of there with the county. And that's not going to give us any revenue to fix the problem. We're not going to have opportunity to collect a fee up front. We're not going to have the opportunity to collect property tax from people who live there. We're not going to have the opportunity to take much advantage of the sales tax until they come and drive down that road to come shop in Hendersonville. And so one of the big concerns I have is this money may not be enough to fix all the problem, but it's money that can fix a significant portion of the problem relatively quickly, and then free up money that's being generated in other portions of Hendersonville to serve those other portions of Hendersonville as well. One of the reasons I came to that conclusion, and Mayor, I'm getting ready to make a motion, is, and it'll be a two-parter if that's okay. was because of the presentation we saw on capital projects. And I would like to move to suspend rules to allow Mr. Harrison to make the same presentation if he could. And the second part of that is I would also like to have a 5-minute break so he can set up. It's a rather long presentation, so everyone who's here who would like to see it, if they need to have an opportunity to take a little break, they can do that before he begins the presentation. That way they can see it in full.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to suspend the rules and take a 5-minute break.
That's fine, but I would like to push that to 10 minutes.
I will defer to the senior member.
We have a motion, and does the seconder agree to that, whoever the seconder
Yes.
was? There we go, to have a presentation by Jim Edwards. Anybody else other than Jim Edwards, do you want to include in that?
Jim Harrison.
Jim Harrison, excuse me. Anybody else other than Jim Harrison, do you want to include in that?
Is there anybody else who needs
Rob,
to?
Stan, and Mike?
Mark, well, can we just say from the applicant?
Sure. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. 10 minutes.
I noticed that.
We've got Jim Harrison, who's the engineer for this project. Jim, go ahead. You're on.
Oh, thank
Identify
you.
yourself.
My name is Jim Harrison, and I am with Civil Site Design Group. I'm the engineer for this project. I actually also live at 119 West Ridge Drive. Thank you tonight. I'm going to go through what we went through at Capital Projects last Thursday. I'm going to go through it a little quicker, but I'm going to try to hit all the key points because I know there are several, and I don't want to waste everybody's time, but I want to hit the main items. What you're looking at up here on the screen is a highlighted drawing showing each large development along Saundersville Road. Essentially, that black line right down the middle there between all those developments is Saundersville Road, this being the south end towards the bypass. That red circle right there is kind of around the interchange at the bypass. This other red circle down here is on Big Station Camp Road, and it is running, the Big Station Camp Road runs right down through here. The reason I point this out and the reason we start with this slide is there's kind of a break point in here in the middle where you hit Lower Station Camp, and it's right about that spot right there. And what I want to talk about a little bit is we did a traffic study and completed our traffic study in March of this year. There's another traffic study that's been done by the city. It's looked at a lot of traffic volumes, a lot of traffic counts. A lot of that has been based off of data that's been collected for the last 10 years by TDOT. And what I'm going to go through in this presentation is to really try to explain and diagram how TDOT has counted traffic right down here on the southern end, right as you approach the bypass of Saundersville Road. And then they've also counted traffic up here on the northern end, right as you cross Lower Station Camp Creek. So we're going to talk about that. But the first thing I want to talk about is the traffic data is going to show that there's kind of a stable pattern there. That number on the end, the northern end, has not increased as much. One of the reasons that's pretty obvious when you look at this map is if you're right in this area, if you're over here by Welch College, if you're over here by Station Camp Middle or one of these subdivisions on Big Station Camp, it's a whole lot easier to go down here to the bypass for most traffic than to try to go all the way through Saundersville Road. And generally the traffic that's generated by these homes goes towards the bypass here, and that's generally what we saw reflected in that data. So we're going to walk through this. I'm going to really try to explain what I mean by that. Before I start through this, just to go through some history, this is Windcrest, Millstone, Saundersville Station, and Winbrook Trace, and then Country Hills. I just kind of call to your attention the amount of road impact fee paid here was 0. The amount of road impact fee paid here was 0, 0, 0, and then there's Forest Park at $2,100. So I just point that out for the record. Now I'm going to get into some of the graphs, and I'm going to have to look down at my notes here because my eyes are good, but they're not that good that I can read those little bitty numbers up there on that screen. So I'm going to kind of look down here at my numbers and point up here to this. But the orange line here is the number of houses and number of homes without Forest Park. The blue line is the number of homes with Forest Park. This first number here is 2007. And let me just stop for a minute and explain what we did here. You know how you can go back and get timeline images on Google Earth? We went back and got those 2007 maps and we counted how many houses were there. We went through each development and counted how many was there. And then we went up here to 2015 and we did the same thing, and we counted how many houses are here. And then we went to 2017, and we counted how many houses are here. So that number's the same because Forest Park hasn't been included. When you come up here, you start to see the blue line is a little higher for Forest Park as those lots come online. So you see there is a little bit of increase, but what I want to really point out is that this current level of homes, this blue line right here that we're at right now, we're going to see growth regardless. Either we're going to see growth on that orange line or we're going to see growth on that blue line. The bottom line is when you count these numbers up, you're at about twice the numbers that you have right now. For homes that you've got out there right now, it's going to double over the next 15 years. So these blue circles really identify on this chart when, according to the traffic studies, we're going to see intersections along Saundersville Road start to fail. And those key intersections are the intersections in the middle section of the road. I'll show this a little bit later, but on the southern section of the road, Millstone's already doing some 4-lane improvements out there. So there's 4 lanes that are going to be in front of that development. But on the middle section of the road, we've got 2 critical intersections that are really starting to fail. And that's what these numbers really kind of show. So this is the home counts, and these are just the raw data that we show with the home counts. Then on the ADT, and I'm going to kind of go through this left to right. It's a little hard to see, but over here on the left, these are all the intersections on Saundersville Road. This is Windcrest, Millstone, this is Winbrook Trace, Country Hills Drive, Settlers Way, our proposed Forest Park entrance. The other is where we just included some numbers for some of those larger tracks if they ever developed as something. And then this is Cannon's Crossing and Lower Station Camp. Now what you'll see is just kind of generally a trend. This bar over here on the left is 2007. The next one is 2015, 2017, and then going out to 2022, 2027, and then 2032. So you can see here in front of Windcrest that these numbers get fairly large, but generally you can see the pattern how traffic is dropping along the road. This is the south end, this is the north end. Again, I'll point out, this is all based on TDOT numbers. It's not numbers that we came up with. This is based on TDOT numbers that have been taken for the past 10 years. And that's the same thing that the third-party city review is based on as well. Again, I highlighted these key points right here in the middle. If you remember the 4-lane sections being done right here on these spots with the higher traffic numbers, but in the middle of the roadway, you're going to see a point here over the next 2 to 5 years where you're going to have problems either with Forest Park or without Forest Park just because of the growth that's on pace. So I'm going to I'll come back to that slide if I need to. I kind of went through that pretty quick. This is a diagram of where the improvements would be planned. It's a little hard to see, but over here is Millstone. In between, there's red 4-lane diagram. This is concept 5. It was as it was outlined in the city study. This is step 1 of concept 5, as I would call it. It's actually concept, is it 4, Keith? Am I remembering that right? Which one was the intersection? 4. Intersection was 4. So concept 4 is the intersection, which is right in here. There's actually another intersection, Cannon's Crossing, that was included as that as well. I'm going to zoom in here, but these are the intersections kind of in the middle of the road where you're going to see growth over the next 2 to 5 years start to create a problem. So there's also something else I'll point out. Even though Millstone is doing some widening up in here, there's a stretch of this road that really needs to be paved, and it shows up as poor on the inventory that Public Works did, and that's an important thing, and that's something that's included in our numbers as well. This is just a blow up, a little bit closer in view. This is Millstone. This is the 4 lanes. This shows kind of the blue lines out here on the outside where you've got right of way going down here. This is going down to the intersection where you got Country Hills Drive, Settlers Way, Winbrook Trace, and then improved turn lanes, left turn lanes, right turn lanes, and then some of the right-of-way that's associated with Concept 5. I'm going to stay on this for just a minute and just explain what this is. A lot of the capacity on this road through here is dependent on the width of the turn lanes, the length of the turn lanes, whether you have a car stacked up turning left behind a right turning car out of one of these intersections. But there's also other alignment issues. There's a utility pole, for example, out here right next to the roadway that needs to be taken out. And this curve, this horizontal curve as you go to the north, right there at Country Hills Drive, needs to be flatter and safer. It's too sharp right now. So that's one of the improvements that would take place. So that intersection and that money, that $653,000, we've done detailed estimates and we've looked at the lanes, and we're confident with our study and with the city study that can be done with those initial dollars. And we think that's important to do because in 2 to 5 years you're going to see that come to be a need because of the traffic flow out there. The next slide is a little bit more, and I apologize, this is an engineer, it's a little too analytical, but I'm going to kind of walk through this. This is 2006 to 2016. Part of what I wanted to show here is this short little green line is the north end of Saundersville Road, and you see how it kind of bounces up and down. It really just kind of stays the same. That's what I was talking about on the first chart. But you can see on the blue line as you went over the years, and that's the south end towards the bypass, that you had kind of a general growth trend. You had kind of a little spike that spiked up here in 2007, which we all know what happened after 2007. Then it kind of flattened out, and then it's kind of picked up over the years. But we believe it will continue to rise. So that's from the south to the north. That's on Saundersville Road. And I want to point this out one more time. Again, that's the southern end. That's the middle of the road, right about Settlers Way, and that is the northern end. That's 2006. This is 2016. Now, going on to the next slide, and you're like, oh my word, yeah, he's got more lines. Now, these 3 bars off here to the left are Saundersville Road. This is the north end, the middle end, and the south end. This orange line is Indian Lake Road, just south of Nanny Berry, with 2-lane road with driveways every 100 feet. Saundersville Road doesn't have driveways every 100 feet. Saundersville Road has intersections, which is far better for traffic flow. Driveways every 100 feet can be a little bit of a challenge, but Indian Lake Road south of Nanny Berry. This next road over here, or this next little bar right here, is Walton Ferry near Donna Drive. That's about 2.5 blocks south of Imperial. 2-lane road with driveways. Now again, this is 2006, but you might notice you're seeing sort of the same pattern over here. You see really kind of the same relationship. You see the southern end of Saundersville Road has grown in 2016, but you can see these are still, Indian Lake Road and Walton Ferry are still about double what you're seeing in the middle of Saundersville Road at Settlers Way. The last little short bar out here, and it's about twice the height or twice the number of ADT that it is in the middle of Saundersville Road, is Old Shackle Island Road at Volunteer. And this last bar is the last road that we completed with 4 lanes and a turn lane, and that is New Shackle Island Road. This quantity of 24,656 ADT, and you can see how high that's been over the last 10 years. That's the road that we just completed as 4 lanes with the turn lane in front of the hospital. So it just gives you kind of a magnitude of where we're at on some of those things. It helps for me to create some perspective. This again is Saundersville Road at the southern end, moving through each intersection, Millstone, going up to Country Hills Drive, going up to Settlers Way, going up to the proposed Forest Park entrance, and this is traffic with Forest Park included. And again, this is Indian Lake Road, south of Nanny Berry. This is Walton Ferry, 2.5 blocks south of Imperial. This is Old Shackle at Volunteer, and this is New Shackle right in front of the hospital. Just to give some perspective on where we're at in the comparison. Now, you would say, well, that's in the past. In the future, what we expect to see, and when we plot out the number of homes and we compare that to the ADT and we do a one-to-one comparison with real data, with real TDOT figures, with real home counts and everything else. If you look at this blue line up here, this blue line is what you've seen in 2006, 2015, 2016, 2017, running all the way through. And that blue line is for Indian Lake Road, just south of Nanny Berry. This orange line is Settlers Way, right in the middle of Saundersville Road, and that's currently where you're at 2017. And we would expect in 2022 it would be here, at about 8,700. It starts out at 6,600, goes to 8,700, and then in 2027, we would see it jump up to about 10,600, and then finally, at about 2032, or about 13 years from now, we would see it get to the point where Indian Lake Road is, the two-lane road with the driveways every 100 feet. So by comparison, that's where we are. Now, I mentioned those numbers because I want to add some perspective, and I'll get to a point here where I'm going to talk about an estimate and talk about what we're doing. All this said, the important thing to us is to hit those intersections where you're going to start to see a level of service of failure like I pointed out on the first few slides. To get at those intersections, to improve those intersections, you all know if you go out there that there's transitions that are not done well, there's left turn lanes that don't have the proper length, you don't have left and right coming out of subdivisions. So what we want to do is make sure we can make those improvements so that you have a high level of service with the traffic that's already coming that way. The last thing I'll point out is with this development, and this is Saundersville Road over here on the right, and what this shows is the red is steep, very steep slopes. The orange is kind of steep, not quite so steep, but steep slopes. This is Country Hills down in here, and this shows the east-west corridor that would run all the way through Norman Creek, through Forest Park over here, and it would connect into Durham Farm. That's Durham Farm on the left-hand side. If you are in Durham Farm, and I was touring a youth pastor around before I realized this, I was looking at houses in Durham Farm, and I said, let's go over to Saundersville Road. And so I wanted to go back towards Hendersonville, so I had to come all the way past the bypass down to Saundersville Road, and then go all the way on Saundersville Road, and then come up that way, past south of the bypass. So this east-west connector would provide this is a $2.5 million project that's being done as part of the Forest Park project. So I mentioned that because that's a huge contribution to the city. The last thing is I'm going to dive in just a little bit on Concept 5 versus Concept 4. Concept 5 was a concept that middle portion of turning it to 4 lanes from the city's report. And it had an estimate, and this is the estimate that showed the $12.2 million. And we've gone and taken a detailed look, and I think Keith has mentioned this several times, that this is kind of a high-level estimate. This is a conservative estimate, and we understand all that. But it's got some numbers in here that I think are a bit, well, they're more than inflated. They're very inflated. So we went through here and looked at the earthwork, which was at $2.2 million. We think it's more like $300,000. We looked at the other, which is $830,000. We're not sure what other is, but we took it down to $300,000. Not sure $300,000 worth of other may be enough. We took the $1.99900 million right-of-way, which is basically about $10 short of being $2 million, down to $50,000. Why do we do that? Because if you go back to and I'll go back there, if you go back to these drawings and you look at where the improvements are going to happen, most of the length and most of this right-of-way is along Country Hills. Well, who owns Country Hills? The city. Most of this area is along land that will be future development. As we develop plans, we can require them to give us right-of-way. There won't be any cost associated with it. There's only really 2 small pieces of property that we think would calculate out to be about $20,000 worth of right-of-way. So it's a very small expense for the right-of-way. So that's just kind of a little bit of an example of how we got to this. The bottom line is that total, once we adjust this out, is more like $5.9 million. We said, okay, let's add back another $800,000. Let's say it's $6,700,000, just to be safe. The bottom line of what I'm trying to explain here is, without Forest Park, the city has an obligation of right at about $850,000. What is that? That's $200,000 worth of resurfacing. That's $650,000 worth of intersection improvements. And with Forest Park, we know that can turn into zero because of the contribution, because of the initial contribution, and because of what we bring over the long haul. Over the long term, if you take the $6.7 million and you take the 20%, if this became an MPO project, that would be $2.1 million without Forest Park. With Forest Park, it turns into $518,000. So we believe we're making a huge impact now. We believe we're making a huge impact for the future. We believe a yes on this means a yes to proper growth, a yes to adequate infrastructure with proper growth. We know we have an attractive development, and I'm going to, if it's okay with Alderman Sprouse, I'd like for Mike just to come up and point out a few things about our development.
You're okay, John.
Is that all right? And then I'll be available just for any other questions, but the bottom line is we wanted to lay this out so that, and please think about this because we want you to see exactly why this is important to Saundersville Road and exactly what's appropriate for Saundersville Road as accurately as we can present it.
Mike, give us your name, please.
Yes, Mike Stanton, represent TN Home Sites. I'll get back to the beginning of the slide presentation. I will make this as brief as I can. A lot of you guys have seen this already at various times, some being in planning commission meetings and others. So I'm going to get back here as quick as I can. I do want to address some of the comments because I think we need some clarification on them. We do have one access in, but it's a 33-foot wide road section. It's wider than Saundersville Road. It's wider than most roads in the city. The sub-collector that Jim referenced in his presentation. At the entrance of Forest Park, it's actually 4-lane. I think someone said it was 1 lane in, 1 lane out. It's actually 2 lanes in, 2 lanes out. So I just wanted to clear that up because I'll move through the presentation pretty quick, and I want to make sure I made that point. We've been asked a couple of times why, and it was mentioned tonight, why did Planning Commission denied this, and why are we at Boma tonight? The reality of it was there was no one. In fact, we got high recommendations on the quality and just the quality of the community from Planning Commission members, and we were recommended to, that it was a high quality development. It was recognized as that. So it was down to the money. That body could not discuss funds that was going to be required. We knew that we had private funds coming to the table, but there were some city funds also involved, and they made the recommendation to deny because they couldn't approve it, knowing they really couldn't control that part of it. So I know Ms. Petrelli was in some of those meetings. I think she missed that last one. So I'm going to briefly go through. We talked about the CSD. Mr. Greer made the comment about the property being annexed back over a decade ago. And back at some point, the city hired Randall Arendt to actually study this area. And this is the only area that I think that within the city limits that were even considered an area to be considered conservation subdivision design. In your land use plan 4.1, this was identified as 300 acres, could have 900 units or 3 units per acre. So our density of 2.51 is within that range. I'm going to go through it. In the CSD area is actually part of the Jenkins and the Norman Farm. Norman Creek was recently approved. They have part of their plan is creating their sub-collector, which we would also connect into. That is a major benefit for the city. I do want to make a note because Keith brought it up and Mr. Sprouse also talked about how that we're preserving the tree masses, and that's important to us, and we've designed our development around that quality and having those aesthetics. But this is a typical development where you go in, you just mass clear trees, and that just is not what we were going after as far as quality of a development. But as you can see, this makes up the farms we have. Most of our area is the most developable piece of property, and that's where we have focused most of our development, is in the areas that is less sensitive. And when people drive down Saundersville Road, they look over and they see the trees and the hillsides, and we wanted to maintain that feel as well. Before we ever developed the plan, we had the property surveyed, and we identified trees that we wanted to save, not only exterior tree masses to protect the people that we backed up to, but also the interior tree masses as well, and designed this plan around it. As you can see, we have high-quality open space that is preserved in its natural state, and just high quality. We are offering 8 different house types within this community to hit all those demographics that was talked about earlier this evening. I will make this comment that 30% of the development is targeted to young professionals and empty nesters. That's important. They're not impacting your schools and typically not on the roads at times that are critical. We are, as you can see here, the least dense development on Somersville Road with 2.51 units an acre, 25% attached. Everything else is higher than us. Also, everything else around us is SR1 PD. And Randall Arendt's, in your staff report, there's a couple pictorial illustrations that shows what a conservation plan could look like, but those include apartments and retail and commercial services. That it's not a part of our plan. It also talks about how lots could be smaller, and is recommended to be smaller, so that you can condense it and have more open space. We didn't ask for a variance of any of the requirements. We're at 60-foot minimum lots on the single family, and we're at 25% attached. Real quick, this is for the identification purposes. This is where our property would enter onto Somersville Road. This is the entry. We purposely left that as an elongated entry experience with some neat features throughout it. This is the entrance to our community. You see that 2 lanes in, 2 lanes out. We designed this, and the traffic study was based on one way in, one way out. Even though we knew that was overkill, we wanted to make sure that we designed it for that. So it is designed to handle the traffic. This is the transition zone where it goes from 2 lanes to 1 lane as you enter into the community. This is just a bridge crossing, really just, again, high quality. Wanted to make everything really nice. It's not just about making pretty images. These are renderings of how we foresee the amenity area in Forest Park. It's a high-class, first-class community, one that I think we can all be proud of. The amenity area consists of about 4 acres of high-quality uses. There's a multi-use event lawn, of course, a pool, splash pad, a community structure. We also wanted to create some community parks within the development because we know not everybody wants to go to one location. So we created some pocket parks within the development itself. It was mentioned we are local developers. We live in the city, all of us do. We have chosen to use local builders. Even our developer that we use most of the time is a local guy. So again, keeping it as local as we can. One last thing before I make a couple closing comments is phase 1 and how when we met with the fire department early on, typically they're the tail end of the process. We wanted to meet early and get their feedback, and some of the feedback was adding connection point here. Our little divided area, the transition zone, was a 16-foot drive lane. We made that a 20-foot drive lane. And then, of course, phase 1, being all the pink, has plenty of redundant access. I will also make this note that there are currently 2 other developments on Somersville Road that only have 1 entrance in and out currently, and that's Winbrook and Stonecrest. So I went through that really quick, and for the sake of time, I think you can all sense the quality and the time that we put into creating Forest Park. And I want to thank you tonight for listening. This has been a long night. I also want to, and I thank those who came out tonight for and against. And there's a lot of stats that we heard tonight, and here's some that we jotted down. We had 7 for, 7 against. 6 of the against were actually addresses from the county. We believe that we're making a contribution to the city, and Not that their voices aren't to be heard. One thing I would like to say is let's be mindful of the silent majority, the people that aren't here, that chose not to come for various reasons. This is not really a vote about 653 homes. It's rather a difference of 250 or 653. The property will develop or it will be sold, as the owners have said. This is a chance to bring a high-quality community, smart growth, so a developer that's bringing real impact to the city. We've asked for smart growth. This provides it. You've asked for impact fees. This helps get you there. Timing is critical for all of us, and this is a good time to approve this high-quality development and be able to provide the road improvements that need to be made to our city. And with that, I'll yield my time and answer questions if you have any.
Alderman Sprouse, you still have the floor.
I appreciate the thought and appreciate the presentation, giving that again. I hope that members of this board, members of this community can see why when I consider the volume of traffic and the type of development and the value of development in context of other traffic and other development in other communities in our city, and realize that this is not an outlier in a negative way. And when I know that just my time on the board, how much money the city of Hendersonville has spent into taking what was an old farm road and making it into a major thoroughfare. It's not perfect, but that was money that was spent by existing residents, or taxes collected from existing residents for the benefit of future residents. And now we have the opportunity to reverse that trend and to take revenue from the future residents before they're even here, to make the improvements to the infrastructure before they're even here. And so then we can now focus on the remainder of the community as well, and we can go back and work on some retrofits and handle some of these areas. I look at an entrance to a community that could have 600 homes. There's a road that once I pull off Gallatin Road when I go home tonight, it's going to take me a little over 4 miles to get home. And there's not going to be a single stretch of that road that's going to be as well engineered as the entrance to this subdivision. And that's going to be a road that serves thousands of homes. You saw the numbers. I'll be driving past Nannyberry on Indian Lake Road on my way home. And I know where the rest of y'all will be driving past. And so I thank you for this. I know that this can be highly controversial. I know a vote for or a vote against could be used for us in any way it's being presented politically, one way or the other, because there are good points on either side. I may be the only person who votes for this, but I was elected to make a decision that reflects the interest of the community and the interest of the people who elected me. And I think this best represents the interest of the overall community and those who elect me. I'm going to vote for it. If I'm the only one, wish I wasn't, but I'll be happy to make that stand, and I encourage the rest of you to consider to do the same. Thank you.
Alderman Stamper.
I just had a question. Which two subdivisions did you say had one way in, one way out?
Currently, Stonecrest and Winbrook. Now, there are future connections. Winbrook, as an example, has been building for 20 years, and it still has just one access.
How many, do we know how many lots on?
There's 396 currently there.
In Winbrook?
And I'm not sure about Stonecrest. It's about 200, I think, but.
Okay, that's all I have for now.
Alderman Petrelli.
Thank you, Mayor. So a couple things, so bear with me. You're correct, I was not at the last Planning Commission meeting. I was actually deployed down in Houston for 2.5 weeks, so I'm sorry I could not make that meeting. My first concern is that in citizens' comments, I know several folks came up and mentioned different current zoning. So at some point, I'm going to ask for Keith to come up and kind of review that with everybody. But I just want to give my thoughts on this project. First off, Rob Horton grew up in this community. I've lived in this community since I was little. He's an outstanding developer. He's invested in this community, and I know he's done a lot for this community. And I think folks need to know that. I don't like to see developers be vilified, good, bad, or indifferent, but I appreciate what you've done for the community. I'm obviously concerned about the density of this community. You all, at a previous planning meeting, I asked them to take out 8 lots. A couple months ago, they complied with that, so they've been willing to meet with community members, especially over in Spyglass Way, to kind of make sure that the surrounding neighborhoods, to a certain extent, are not adversely affected. Personally, I would prefer to see the density being more at the estate, your type A houses, which would overall reduce your density. I think it's obviously a concern with the roads and the traffic, but as your presentation pointed out, Pat, Scott, and I, Mark, we represent 1, 2, and I mean, the level of traffic that we deal with on the Walton Ferry Peninsula, Saundersville Road doesn't even come close to what we're dealing with on a daily basis. When I was growing up, Saundersville Road might as well have been 3 counties over. It was considered the country. So, with that being said, I do think it's a very well thought out development. I understand the concerns coming from neighbors who are concerned about their quality of life. How is this going to impact their quality of life? And wearing dual hats of an alderman and a planning commissioner kind of puts me in a position of, do I go with what the planning commissioners ruled, since I'm a member of that, or do I go independent and vote what my gut thinks about this particular development? Either way, I'm going to either get nailed or not. I mean, it's a 50-50 based on what I've gotten in feedback from emails and phone calls. However, I am very concerned, and I'll let, if it's all right, let Keith come up and explain the zoning, what can happen on this property. I'm very concerned if this project is not approved, that what could be coming down the pipeline could be seriously detrimental to this area. I don't know if any of you all have toured factory farming, but they're noisy. They're loud, they're noisy, and they're smelly. And this is about legal rights. What can the owner legally develop on this property? We're not making decisions just based on what we think is pretty or what we feel, but what is also the future for this area of Ward 5? Daryl and Ham have to live with it. If I was voting for Ward 1 residents, I would say, yes, let's do it, because a penny equals $150,000 in tax money. So, i.e., 1.2 million is what, a 6 cents tax increase? So next year, if $1.2 million in road improvements literally equals the city not being given a 6 cent tax increase. So I do commend the developers for offering more than what has been done in the past. We're at 30% build out in Hendersonville, so what we're trying to look at now is land management, proper land management, meaning what is in the best interest of the owner? They have a right to sell the property. What is in the best interest of the neighbors? And what is in the best interest of Hendersonville? It's a very complex issue. It's not black and white. And I understand the concerns on all sides. But again, my concern is this pocket of land, if this project is not approved, what could be coming down the pipeline could be worse than what you're concerned about now. And with that, I'd like to, do I need to suspend the rules
No, we're
for
fine.
Keith to come up?
Keith, come on up.
Keith, if you don't mind just explaining the zoning and what people can currently do from one end to the other on this property.
Okay. The property is currently zoned ER, which is estates residential, And typically, like estates residential, that zoning classification, it's kind of a holding zone, you know, with as development happens or things change, then it's a zone that you would eventually change when, you know, when the environment's right. So that's kind of what an ER zone typically is, and I wasn't here when they put that on there, but looking at it and how things are zoned around it, that's probably what it was. It was probably at the time that it was, I guess, annexed in and the zone was established, was probably, maybe it's not ready for development right now, and let's put it in ER so that at some point in time, you know, the appropriate zone would be put on it at that time. So the ER zoning, so to understand basically what can you do with the property the way it's zoned now, so you don't have to go through a development process like what Forest Park is doing. ER would allow you to break the land up into 1 acre tracts and do single family. It wouldn't allow multifamily, so it'd be single family houses. I kind of did a calculation, and what I do is when I look at land and you try to figure out how many units you could put on there, I take the amount of acreage and I just multiply that times 0.8 to kind of knock out 20% of it for infrastructure, roads, and that type of thing. And then that's how I kind of came up on this property that, you know, you could put 210, but more than likely you probably, depending on how you lay it out, you could put more. In the existing zoning classification would allow for at least 210 houses. Those houses, you know, we're kind of used to requiring brick, and, you know, you can't do vinyl and all that kind of things. On straight zoning, and especially in the ER zoning, there would be no requirement for any brick or any stone, and then vinyl would be allowed. So, I mean, I wouldn't think you would have a development that would have vinyl houses, but you could. That's allowed in the ER zoning classification. Also, within the ER zoning classification, I'd heard the gentleman talk before about the agricultural use of a chicken house or something like that. That is a possibility that you could have a high intensity agricultural use. Currently, farm, and that's, I guess, what it already is, but farm is allowed in ER, and there are protections depending on the type of farming. I'm not for sure if I'd have to look deeper to see if there's restrictions about, you know, chicken farming or some type of real high intensity. But generally, the state of Tennessee has a lot of protection for agricultural uses. And typically, if it's more than 10 acres, you know, whatever the zoning on the land doesn't necessarily control what an agricultural use is for a property of that size. So those are some of the things with the existing zoning that are allowed, and it's similar to some of the things, you know, we had before with Beatty Farms that had the planned development, and then you're probably all familiar with the possibility of another type of development that would be straight zoning. It's just that comparing planned development to straight zoning, and through our straight zoning, it just has different requirements. One other thing that I would need to mention is that if it developed and somebody developed 210 homes, and hopefully they'd be really nice homes, but if they develop those 210 homes through straight zoning, by right, they already kind of, as long as they meet the requirements, you know, by right, they would have the ability to develop those, and it wouldn't be a negotiated planned development. So therefore, like the 1.3 million that we're talking about off-site improvements, that would not be something that would be required, since we don't have development impact fees requirements in our community. Did that kind of cover those?
It
things?
does.
Okay.
And if you don't mind briefly just talking on the conservation plan with the trees, I know it was covered in the presentation, but just that, you know, you all have earmarked some trees, and I know you're keeping the forested area on the steeply graded area. This would be the first conservation. And also another question is for that area that abuts Spyglass Way, that piece of property can never be cleared or developed. It would be a part of the covenants. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah, we would require that to have a conservation easement where that would, you know, you couldn't just come in there and clear cut the trees, or that wouldn't mean, there would be some things where if you had dead trees or something fell, you could remove that. So, but generally that whole buffer would be protected. Yes.
Okay.
And would have to be, and there would have to be a mechanism within the HOA that would be required, a funding a way to fund those things to maintain those buffers.
Okay.
Keith, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Peg?
No,
Alderman
thank you,
Petrilli?
Mayor.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Keith, can you hold on one second? Alderman Frost.
Keith, when you spoke about the chicken farming in the ER zoning or
Yes.
estate zoning,
Yes.
you said that was allowable, possibly allowable?
No, it's allowed use in ER and RR zoning. Farm is allowable, permitted use.
Permitted
If it's in
use
excess.
for the growth and slaughtering of,
Well, if it meets the definition of a farm by the state, and I didn't have what that definition of a farm is, but if it meets the definition of that the state has for a farm, and it's more than 10 acres, then there are things you could do. Again, we would need to look into that a little bit deeper in regards to some of that, more industrialized farming.
well, to follow.
Typically, it meets those requirements, but I would have to look at it to see.
Follow up on that, though, that's a commercial business. So you're telling me that the zoning allows commercial aspects inside a residential zoning?
No, it would allow a farm.
Yeah, but we're sitting on an ER is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay, but and then you said the chicken industry, and I'm using that because the gentleman brought it up.
Yes.
That's a commercial activity, correct?
I would have to look and see if that met the definition by the state and the
Well,
protections of the state, whether it's defined as agricultural or commercial. It certainly would seem commercial, but again, we would have to do some research to determine if that particular use that was just brought up tonight, if that was something that would be allowed. But a farm is allowed, and then it's just determining, what.
I understand
Yeah,
about the
I don't know
farm,
that
but
it's-
it's the commercial activity.
Right.
It's like you've got an overlay sitting on a standard zoning, an ER zoning.
Yeah, and that'd be the state, it'd be the state codification that however the state is protecting agricultural uses. But I would have to check to see if, depending on the intensity of the agricultural use, is that a farm or, would the state recognize that? But I would have to look at it deeper. It goes beyond our zoning ordinance. We would have to look at state law to see what that, what is allowed by that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Appreciate
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks.
Alderman Stamper? Okay. Okay, appreciate that. We've got a request from a resident, Seth Massey, to address a couple things that were brought up in this presentation. Do y'all want to suspend the rules for that to happen? It's Seth Massey, he's a resident out there. He wants to address a couple things that were brought up in the presentation. Hold on one second. I'll so move. Okay. Okay, there you go. He's a resident out there. Want to address a couple things that were brought up in the presentation since the presentation was since citizen comments. Okay, hold on one second. Go ahead.
I think that input's very important, but one thing that we would need to consider is this being an ordinance, it's going to have two readings, and so any information that's presented tonight, should it pass first reading, anyone's going to have at least 2 weeks to contact each of us individually or collectively during email or voice or phone call or anything like that. If we didn't have that opportunity for second reading, or if this was already second reading, I would be more prone to entertain that motion. But since we do have 2 weeks between first reading and a potential second reading, it seems to be a little out of the ordinary.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderman Frost?
That's fine, move on.
All those in favor of suspending the rules allowed Seth Massey to speak, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Anybody vote no? Seth? Good. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna. Go ahead.
I don't have much, and I don't even live in that area. I teach at Station Camp High School, and was talking to my principal earlier tonight, and he had asked to come to this one and another one on some apartments and things. And the only thing I would say is I've been at Station Camp since 2004, and we've gone from 600 students to last year, we were over 800 in a school that was built for 1,200. And we had an addition that took it up to 400 additional students that would have made it go up to 1,600. And just encourage, you know, I know Andy would maybe have more information on this than I do. We don't know the long-range plans, but Dr. Phillips does in Sumner County with the growth. But the way our school was last year, you couldn't get up and down the halls. It was very crowded, and there's a new Cottontown school coming in, but we don't have a date on that, and we don't know the plans yet for that. So again, Dr. Phillips would be the authority on that. But just having been there, we're growing at about 100 students a year. And we got some relief this year when they rezoned by sending some students back to Gallatin High School and to Beach, and we're back down now to 1,680. And again, our school's built for 1,600. So I don't know what that affects, if anything, but I heard a lot of people mentioning education and just kind of wanted to, I didn't know if that was worth anything or not, so I thought I'd share that.
Appreciate that, Mr.
Thank
Mason.
you.
Thank you. One thing I want to add is that Stonecrest, which is where I live, the developer, the plan that was approved, the developer is responsible for a second entrance there. Currently, it does have just one, but a second one, the developer is expected to provide that. We have nobody else in the queue. Excuse me, Alderman Woodcock.
I've heard this a few times, and it didn't bother me when citizens said it, but when an alderman says it, it kind of bothered me. At what point do we decide that if we approve this subdivision and they give us $700,000 up front, Ward 5 loses their paving money? At what point does that money go to other wards? Because that's important to me. If I'm going to tell...
Hold on.
I'm talking to the
Please go
mayor.
ahead.
If I have to tell Country Club Drive that their cul-de-sac's not getting paid because a subdivision came out on Sonnersville Road, that's big to me. I need to know that now. So if that's been decided that Ward 5 is going to lose their paving budget if we get money from a developer, I need to know that. And I would like that answer now. And if you said it, so if you've heard that from someone, you can speak up.
I can't make somebody answer the question.
I can't see that part. Are you pointing me or Scott? Scott.
Okay. Hold on one second. Alderman Sprouse, go ahead.
I apologize if any way that my comments could be taken to mean that Ward 5 would lose paving budget or any sort of maintenance budget. What I'm talking about is infrastructure improvements, such as these intersection improvements, which are not in any budget right now, which would be new spending in future budgets, how that money would be made available. Now, the good thing about that is making that money available for those infrastructure improvements, instead of having to take it out of the general fund or raising taxes to do that, will not take away paving money from Ward 5, but it would do the same thing for Ward 5 as it would for every ward in the city, and it would maintain those funds for other projects and for maintenance of all roads, including those in Ward 5. If we have $1.2 million, whatever the number was, to go for an infrastructure improvement, that means it's $1.2 million that we're not going to have to take away money from anywhere for other projects. Thank you.
Alderman Stamper.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Well, this is a tough one. This is a tough one. I've met with the applicant. I've met with many citizens, heard from folks on both sides of the issue. Even tonight, as one citizen would come up, they'd say something, I'd say, yeah, that makes sense. And then somebody on the other side of it would say something, and I'd say, that makes sense. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. You know, I don't quote scripture here, but the first time in 7 years I'll quote scripture, but it just made me think of that proverb, 18:17, if you want to jot that down if you're taking notes. But the first to state his case seems right until another comes and cross-examines him. You know, it's like one person says something and the next person almost like, oh, well, maybe that's right. So I think I probably speak for several on this board that it's a tough call one way or the other. And so, I mean, they're awful dense. those lot sizes are awful dense. 0.05 acres, I can't even fathom how kind of small that is. The largest one being 0.25. My lot is 0.23, and I'm almost embarrassed that I have a riding lawnmower to cut the grass on it. But it was I mean, it's just not big. It was a gift. It was a gift. But I mean, obviously the density's small. I do like it a little bit better in Durham Farms as far as, I don't want to say Durham Farms is unsightly, but it's a little unsightly right now, in my opinion, as I drive by it almost every day and see it just kind of out there, house after house after house, and not much green space. So the way that the topography lies here and the recess off of Saundersville, there's a lot of attractiveness about it. I do want to see the east-west connector. I think that's important, that we continue to strive and to continue to make developers strive to do their part to see Saundersville connect to New Shackle. In the same way we want to see Drakes Creek Road, which now, if you notice, it's Avant Drive, I think, or something like that, because Drakes Creek's going to shoot all the way out through Durham Farms. And those types of things will help stability of our traffic. So, I mean, I understand traffic queues up and gets bad and those types of things, but, I mean, the numbers don't prove it out as we hear anecdotally. The numbers in Ward 6, for instance, is the highest trafficked area in the city. Out in front of the hospital, for instance, it is 4-laned, and fortunately we had funds from 2009, and we finally got it done. That's when that one started. So if you want to know how long a project takes to get done, that one just finished, that we got funds for in 2009. But okay, back to Forest Park. Yeah, I'm going to vote for this on first reading. This gives us, I reserve the right to vote in a different manner on second reading, because there's still a lot I still want to study and research as far as, how this is going to impact the community at large. I think it's a lot of lots, and that gives me pause. But I know that we're going to grow, and we're going to develop out, and we need to do it responsibly, and there's a lot to attract us to this project, and there's a lot of issues with the project, but fortunately we get two bites at the apple. So tonight I'm going to vote for it. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Stanford, thank you. Alderman Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question for the developer. During our Capital Projects Committee meeting, we talked about the impact the fee for the schools. It came up, I think I heard 70 cents per square foot. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So
when builders
okay.
apply for building permits, they pay 70 cents per square foot.
And it goes directly to the school system for
That's
the
correct.
impact on those schools.
That's correct.
I think everyone needs to know that, because I don't think people are aware of that particular impact fee that's also associated with each one of those houses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Waters.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple of questions or comments. Number one, I think the developers did a remarkable job tonight with the presentation, with the photos, with the video and everything. It's outstanding. But I also want to, in saying that, I want to echo our planning commissioners. They did a terrific job, and I assume, and Keith, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they had the same presentation before they made their decision that we have. Am I correct in that? Okay. So the Planning Commission has denied the proposal. Sometimes I don't agree with the Planning Commissioner. I vote against their recommendation. But as I sit back and I listen to people tonight and the emails I've got, those people on that board that you're associated with, they take a lot of patience and discussion, and they debate, because I sit and watch this one, and I owe them a great attitude to what they've come up with. So the reason I'm saying that is I question, if they feel like it ought to be denied, and you've gave the reasons that they denied it a while ago, it's hard for me to go against their recommendation. But I want to close by saying, Mayor, I might want Mike to come back to the podium if I may.
He's fine. Come on up, Mike.
As I look at Manor Homes, Lot B, Manor Homes, when it's set back, am I reading that correct?
20 feet?
Front is 20, rear is 20, and the side is 7?
That is the current regulations within the city. So
7 feet side? I couldn't get a bicycle through there.
It actually was 5 and it went to 7. So 7.
But that is right? It's 7 feet?
That is correct, 7 feet.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mike. Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Another meeting with a lot of passion. Seems like we've had a lot of those recently, and that's good, I guess. I'll compliment the developer of putting together what looks like a very good plan. I've told them that in person, and I'll say that again. Of taking time and explaining and having meetings, making the largest offer of a fee that's ever been offered to this board in the city before, $2,100 per house, per lot. That's very commendable. I'll tell you, I don't know if that's the right fee. That's a big fee compared to what we've had, and some of the neighbors who have built out there have paid 0 fees. Compliment Jim on his presentation. He is an engineer. He's a numbers guy. He draws lots of lines, and sometimes his stuff's really boring. But it is very informative. And I've seen it 3 times, so I think I feel informed. Not bored necessarily, but informed. We're getting ready to vote after we get done with Forest Park here. We've got a couple other things, and then we're going to vote to spend $40,000 on a feasibility study for impact fees. We voted 2 weeks ago to spend $40,000 on a feasibility study for impact fees. One thing that concerns me a little bit, if we pass Forest Park, then we've kind of set a precedent of where our impact fees may be, and I don't know if I want to spend that $40,000 then. If we can make a deal for $2,100, then we might be able to make a deal for $3,500 with somebody, or whatever that percentage may be. So I don't know. I kind of feel we should have did that a long time ago. I'll take some of the blame for that, of being on this board for a little while and not talking about impact fees and getting in some of the situations with road and infrastructure that we are now. And we're trying to back up and fix some of those issues. And I think we'll get them fixed. I just think it's going to take some time. One in, one out concerns me, and I know you've tried very hard to find that other entrance and exit. I know that. You've talked to everybody around there, but that does concern me, especially when it gets to the point that it's built out. And we've got 600 and some lots back there, but we only have one way in and one out. I don't know what we did with the other ones necessarily are right. The other 1 or 2 that you're talking about with one in and one out, I don't think that's right, but we did those things. To me, there comes a time when if you've done something wrong, you stop and start over again. And so that's a concern. I told Mr. Horton the other day that I'm an old salesman and I use a T, pros and cons. And it's pretty full, and this deal here is pretty full on each side of pros and cons. And I'm kind of like my colleague in Ward 6. You know, I see a lot of good, but I see some that strikes me not so good. And I've told you what I think those are. Our planning commission, and I'll go back to them, works pretty hard. I've voted against those folks 2 times. And they haven't been on near as anything quite as big as this. I have a pretty high regard on those folks in the commission doing their job and doing the study they need to. Talked to a few of those people in the past week and a half, since this has got to the point that it's here. And I will tell you that I'm going to support the Planning Commission's decision. I'm going to vote no. And nothing against the developers, nothing against the owners of that property out there. I just feel like I need to support the Planning Commission. I feel like that was the right decision. And those are my concerns. If we get our feasibility study fixed and we figure out where we're going to be and we can find one way in, one out, and we get back to the Planning Commission, I'd be pretty happy voting yes on this development, even though it is 653 acres. But right now, I'll be a no vote. Thank you.
Alderman Frost.
Thank you, Mayor. Sitting here tonight, listening to all the presentations and all of my colleagues' comments, most of everything that I have wanted to say and thought about saying has been said. The folks I sit up here with really pay close attention and do their due diligence in making a decision, and this is, as Mr. Stamper has said, is a tough one, and this is a tough one. I commend my colleague, Mr. Sprouse, in his comments because a lot of his were spot on the positive side. Not that there is a positive or a negative, because everybody who stepped up to that podium this evening, their points were just, you could see a lot of them were heartfelt. You could see a lot of them were from a business standpoint. And you could see a lot of them from people just living in a community who wants what's best for their community. And that's really neat to see. It's great when people take an interest in what's going on. I have a real concern because months ago I met with the three gentlemen who I've dealt with Mike before on another project. And it's nice to deal with local folks that live here, go to church here. You see them at the store, see them in the park. And part of what is running through my mind is we have three people who really have a good project in my view. It is a little dense for me. I remember Millstone. I worked with Bob on that, and I remember the negative comments that were made about Millstone, and I voted for it. Mike has always done, and I've not had the pleasure of a personal basis other than in a meeting with Stan and Rob, but I had a conversation, a 45-minute conversation with Rob yesterday. But Stan has always done what he said he's going to do, to the letter. I've heard everybody up here talk about, and Ms. Petrelli kind of set the platform for me. I've heard all the comments up here, but one thing that sticks in my mind, it's a good project, it's on the wrong road. The money that they want to put into it, the $1,377,000, that's the most that's ever been spent out there. None of the other projects, as Mr. Harrison pointed out, as far as the houses are concerned and the fees, did that. So I commend them for that. I think they have started a whole new process. But I fall back into the emails and the phone calls and watching the folks at that podium. I fall back to, yes, I like this project. Yes, I think it would be a good product. Yes, I think it would benefit everything that everybody said. people wanting to move, wanting that type of lifestyle. I'm sick of cutting grass. I can't convince my wife to get out of a 2,500 square foot house when there's just two of us. And they have something that I would love to go into. But I still fall back, and it may sound corny. If it does, it does. Doesn't bother me. The folks have said they don't want it. This is in my ward. It's in Darrell's ward. I don't know what Darrell's going to do, but my responsibility is to the people that I represent. And the majority have said they don't want it. I'm concerned about Saundersville Road. I think the money would have gone a long way to help, but it's a piecemeal to completing the whole road. That whole road needs to be fixed. I don't know how. I'm not an engineer. I don't know the best way to do it. But I feel like this board will have to come up with a way to fix that road. But fixing this particular section, and then we have the other sections that remain untouched, I don't think is the proper way to go. Regretfully, I'm going to have to vote against it, but I encourage Mike and his team to not, at least I hope you don't take it personal. It's not meant to be, and I sure don't want to lose your friendship. But it's business. And I just feel like it's for that community, under these circumstances, at this point in time, that's what we need to do. Thanks, Mayor.
Alderman Frost, thank you. Alderman Gilly.
Thank you, Mayor. I've tried to be as quiet as possible and listen and learn. And here's where I've been the last however many months, weeks, whatever we've been researching this. In our packet on page 57, in bold black ink, it says important. And Keith, you wrote, I'm assuming you wrote this, so you tell me if I'm wrong. Important, in its deliberations, the mayor and alderman shall make specific findings with regard to the following grounds if an amendment to change existing zoning classification. A, the zone change amendment is in agreement with the land use plan for that area. That seems to be a gray area. B, there will be no adverse effect upon adjoining property owners unless such effect can be justified by the overwhelming public good or welfare. That would be a hard one to answer in a positive manner as well. C, no property owner or small group of property owners will benefit materially from the change to the detriment of the general public. Not that anybody's being hurt either way, but that would be a one to hard to answer as well. Conditions affecting the area have changed to a sufficient extent to warrant an amendment to the land use plan and subsequently the zoning map. All of those, I'm having a real hard time getting to an overwhelming yes. A real hard time. And for our planning director and our planning commission to not be able to get to that point is tough for me to go against people who are way more experienced than I am. It would also be completely hypocritical of me to vote yes to this when I just spoke on behalf of our own ward to vote against a higher density property development at the Beatty Farm. That would be like me saying, I don't care about y'all, I just care about myself. It is probably the best I do want, and I've told people this when they've called me, the people on Saundersville Road, the people in Ward 5 need to understand what could go on here if this is denied. And they need to understand that when it comes down to it, if the improvements that aren't made because we deny this proposal need to be made, somebody, some way, somehow is going to have to pay for it. So I will hope in that case that you support whatever needs to be supported to make those improvements. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Gilly, thank you. Alderman Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One other question for the developers. It was mentioned earlier about the planning department didn't have or had your information you had presented to us tonight. I want to verify that they did see this presentation regarding the traffic impact fees and all the information that was given to us in the last week or so. Because I thought there might have been some.
That was not part of the planning commission presentation.
Due to information not being available, I believe.
That's right.
Exactly.
It wasn't available. We just got the fee identified, but again, planning commission voted to deny it because they knew there was city money that's going to have to be spent in addition to the private money, and was the big reason that planning commission voted to deny, because they couldn't vote to approve it because they didn't have the authority in their minds. Rightfully so, but the presentation relative to the traffic impact and the improvements that are to be made was not part of the presentation at the Planning Commission.
Thank you. No further questions.
Alderman Campbell, thank you. Alderman Sprouse.
Thank you, Mayor. I will let you know that information that was presented, that Mr. Harrison presented regarding traffic counts today, traffic counts 20 years down the road, and putting them in the context of how that traffic count compares to existing roads. Sometimes it's hard for me to say, something says it's, 10,000 square miles. How big is it? I don't really know. Someone says, well, it's about as big as Texas. Texas is a lot bigger than that. And all of a sudden, I got an idea. So as soon as that information was placed in context, because we were originally presented A, B, C, D, and E's for standards for traffic, and I asked, well, what's the traffic flow on Indian Lake Road? And that's when we got the number. I would like to think that the Planning Commission seeing that could affect their opinion, but there's one thing we need to consider. The Planning Commission has a very limited scope when they're making their decisions. Because as has been mentioned, they don't have funding authority. They're not going to want to write a check that this board is going to have to fund before it's cashed. And another issue is, I respect all of the opinions that have been expressed by the residents, by staff, by the applicants, and every member of this board, even if we disagree on this vote. Because there are different opinions and different ways of looking at things, and this is not a good, bad issue. I think this is one of those better, best type decisions. But there's one thing I will not do. I will listen to the recommendation of any committee of this board. I will listen to the recommendation of any advisory board that we put together. I will take the recommendation of staff and consider that, and I will consider the recommendation of the Planning Commission. But I will not let any of those entities have the final say on an issue that's before this board or mayor and alderman. And here's why. We're the only people in the process who are elected by the people. We're elected to a term, 4 years, to make decisions, and hopefully we can be judged on the value of those decisions over 4 years. Planning Commission is not elected. And if we were to defer automatically decisions to a Planning Commission, then we don't need to have elections. Or we don't need to have these decisions being made by people who are elected. I rarely disagree with the Planning Commission, but I think this is a case when I look at the considerations that we have especially in the light of additional information being available to us, that I think that a no vote is not a bad decision. I just think that a yes vote is a much better decision. Thank you.
Alderman Sprouse, thank you. We have nobody else in the queue at this point. We have a proper motion and a proper second for first reading of ordinance 2017-34. This is an ordinance rezoning Forest Park property located west of Saundersville Road, north of Spyglass Way, and approving a preliminary master development plan to govern the development of this property. When her name is called, please, in favor say aye. If you're opposed, say no. Okay?
Brown?
No.
Campbell?
Aye.
Frost?
You say me?
Frost?
No.
Hedberg? No. Gilly?
No.
Petrelli?
Abstain.
Skidmore?
No.
Sprouse?
Yes.
Stamper?
Yes.
Waters?
No.
Woodcock?
Clary.
No. That fails 3 votes to 8 to 1. Keith, can you help us out here? Can you come to the podium? And John, we need a motion at this point to dispense of this, to move forward with this? What do we need?
Yes, it would be dispensing with it. If it did not pass, then it would not, John, it would
Can you
not
help us with the wording?
go to the,
Am I right?
You have defeated it. You have
Yeah.
voted against it.
Do we need any specific wording?
well, I think it's already, the motion's already been done,
Okay,
or, right?
I think
Yeah.
it's going to the next
we're
item.
good, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yes.
Thank you, I appreciate
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Okay. Next thing, Alderman Hedberg, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to move forward to the next agenda item, ordinance 2017-35, with regards to the employee payroll. We need to let these people go home.
So we want to move that to be heard as the next item?
Yes, please.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. This requires at least a 2/3 vote. That requires 8 votes. Alderman Strauss, to discuss this? Okay, Alderman Strauss.
Sorry,
Okay. To move it forward in the agenda? Okay. All those in favor of moving this item forward in the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Now we are going to... Yeah. This is... shoot. 1735? Thank you. Thank you, okay. Second reading of ordinance 2017-35. This is an ordinance regarding the change of the work period of employees of the city of Hendersonville, Tennessee. Alderman Hedberg? Or maybe not?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Alderman Cunningham. Alderman Sprouse?
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize. It took me a little bit to catch up with the idea of,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
We need a motion.
Oh, I'll make a motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I took me a while to get to it, but now I'm agreeing, or I'm questioning why we even need to appropriate the $250,000. And here's the way in my simple non-accountant mind, and I'm looking at the account at the other end of the table, but I'm going to simplify this. I'm going to say that I'm someone who's paid once a week, and I'm paid $10. And I'm paid on Friday for the work that I've done the week ending that Friday. So on Friday, I'm going to be paid $10. Next Friday, I'll be paid $10 for that week's work. But then we're going to change the pay date. So now all of a sudden, I'm going to start getting paid a week after the pay period ends. So that would mean when Friday comes, I'm not going to get paid that day. I'm going to get paid the next Friday because we've moved the date. And that's so similar to mine, what we're doing right now. Since we're shifting the pay period forward, there's going to be that little gap period of time where people wouldn't be getting paid. So what we're essentially doing is we're saying we're still going to give you the money. Friday comes, we're going to give you a bonus to cover because instead of getting paid for this week today, you're going to get paid for this week next week. I get that. So the same amount of money is coming in to me as an employee. The same money is going out that week from my employer. So if we appropriate $250,000 right now, we're not going to be spending $250,000 more in this budget. I'll get that extra check when I leave. Let's say I retire on a Friday, and under the old plan, that Friday I would have gotten paid and it would have been my last check. Well, all of a sudden I'm going to retire, and the next Friday I get the check. That's what's going to happen. And it's going to be staggered because we're not going to have every employee who's working for the city of Hendersonville when this plan is enacted retire the same budget year. It's going to be staggered across 10, 20, 30-year careers. So what I'd like to do is offer an amendment that we enact the plan without having to spend $250,000 because we're not going to spend $250,000 this year. I should say I'm going to spend an extra $250,000 this year.
So remove the $250,000, but leave the rest of the enacting portion of the ordinance in place?
Yes.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Where did that second come from?
From the accountant.
Sort of looking to see what the accountant says. The Stamper fault.
Alderman Stamper.
Thank you, everybody stealing my thunder tonight. Yes. I think a news story, and Mayor, she's not in here, so maybe the one person needs to hear it. I wasn't talking about her. The explanation for what we're doing could have been communicated better. For those that attended the Finance Committee meeting, I made the same argument. But I was okay with the ordinance because I knew at the end of the day where we were getting to the right answer for our folks, and so it didn't bother me about the $250 until I started getting emails saying, hey, let's not spend $250,000 right now on this. And that's exactly what the alderman who just spoke indicated. We're not spending $250,000 right now. Assuming no employee were to terminate their service by the year ended 6/30/18, we will spend the exact same dollars, assuming we didn't make any change to the pay dates and things like that. We're going to be spending the same exact dollars. Yes, there's going to be some more accrued salaries that they've technically earned, but they won't get paid those out in the fiscal year ended 6/30/18. So the $250,000 is more of an advance. So if we were paying it out, we get it right back 5 days later. And then so it'd be like every pay period from now on will be, we advance them 5 days, and then 5 days later, assuming they're still with us, it gets paid back. And so the only time it doesn't get paid back is when they terminate. So yes, it's been said exactly correctly, and but all the talk about making folks whole and stamper adjustments and things, that's all part of it. It's not a bonus. We're not giving employees, they're not going to receive more in their paycheck. They're going to get paid the same amounts they've been getting paid on the same exact days they've been getting paid. That's all that this adjustment, which will, by the end of time, when the final person turns the lights out and leaves, it will cost the city $250,000. But to say that we're going to spend it in fiscal year 18, we're not. We're not going to spend it all in 18. We're going to spend a potentially very small piece of that this year. So I do want to acknowledge that yes, we are eventually going to spend approximately $250,000. I'm not trying to do voodoo accounting. So I mean, we've agreed that to do that, but it's not cash out the door this year. So I support the amendment and encourage the board to do so. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Stamper. Alderman Frost.
Quick question I guess I'll have to address it to you, but it's for
I may be actually able to answer it.
Mr. Stamper.
I'm not supposed to say name.
Excuse me, Doctor.
The second of the amendment.
The amendment, as I'm understanding it, will not shy the employees on this end, the front end, the 5 days. Is that correct?
Right. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, appreciate it.
So their checks stay the same through the
Yes.
process?
We still have the enactment portion above that, but their check should stay the same. At least my understanding. We don't have anybody else in the queue. Alderman Petrelli. Oh, well, you got to press your buttons.
Was it quick enough?
Alderman Petrelli.
Thank you, Mayor Clary. At the risk of beating this to death, we're not changing to the electronic system, to the actual payroll system till May, which is what we determined at the last meeting. So my question is, why are we changing? We're semi-monthly now. This ordinance is stating that we're going to remain semi-monthly, but my question...
Alderman Petrelli, I don't know that we're on that's on the amendment. Could we dispose of the amendment and then come back to your item, or does it need to be?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Alderman Skidmore?
Yes, thank you. Mine is to the amendment.
Okay.
I would just like it repeated to where we're putting this. I mean,
Okay.
like, are we striking be it further ordained?
Yes. Page 13.
Yeah.
The paragraph that begins with "be it further ordained" and ends with January 2018. That's my understanding of the amendment.
That is, your understanding is correct.
Okay. Okay.
Muchas gracias.
Okay. Alderman Petrelli will come back. We don't have anybody else in the queue to speak on the amendment. Do you want to speak on the amendment? No. Okay, we'll come back to you then. Alderman Woodcock.
I just want to make sure before we vote on this that the finance department, if they like to add something or correct anything, now would be a perfect opportunity for that.
I do want to let you know that if you don't appropriate the 250, it's going to hit their salary budgets this fiscal year. If you keep their checks the same, you are double paying for 5 days. And at the end of this fiscal year, instead of accruing 4 days like I normally would, I'm going to accrue 9 days. So that is going to hit this fiscal year's salaries budget. So if you don't appropriate the 250, they could potentially be over budget in their salary line item for this fiscal year. So if you don't appropriate it, the salaries are an estimate. They could come in under based on if employees leave or if they have, some new positions that they haven't hired for. They could cover it in their budget, but they may not be able to. So just know that if you don't appropriate the 250, they'll come in short on their salaries this year.
Sure, hold on, Dana. Alderman Strauss.
So what you're saying is that in my description, I'm looking at one timeline that is now to the end of the employee's service with the city. But what you're saying is at the end of each fiscal year, there is, at least from an accounting standpoint, a cutoff. And so while we're saying that they're done while the period's being done, you still have to have that money because you're going to be cutting a check in the next fiscal year for the previous fiscal year.
Yes. Yes.
Alderman Stamper.
Thank you. And this gets back to the exact same discussion that Dana and I had. What she said is not incorrect. But, there's different bases of accounting, and I don't want to get too technical, but accrual accounting is what we do for our financial statements, and it's supposed to reflect economic reality of transactions that take place. There's never been any hidden motive for me that we're not giving 5 days worth of salary. We're cutting out. We're putting basically we're treating a 10-day period and paying them for 15. But the cash flow is what I'm looking at. The cash out the door will not be any more in the fiscal year, or next fiscal year, or the one after. So they will not actually realize the cash in hand until the termination. That's when they'll actually. That's when we'll stop advancing them 5 days of pay, and we'll write it off, and the city will eat it at that point. So, like I said, if we pay $250,000 in advance, we're not actually paying cash in advance. We're just accruing it in advance. We're just treating it on paper as though they've earned it. But W-2 wages is based on actual cash received. And they're not going to receive more money in this fiscal year or in the calendar year. So what Dana is saying is accurate, and what I'm saying is accurate. And I think I'm as clear as mud on it. But we're not writing a $250,000 check. We're not writing any more. That's why when you saw the presentation, you saw that dip on that one period where we go from 15 days to 10 days to give that 5-day lag built in. So we have to make up that difference, or else the employees, it's either them or us for those 5 extra days. And what we're saying is, we'll advance you those 5 extra days. you agree to work those 5 extra days, and so you earn the money, so in essence, you're paying back the advance 5 days later. There's no easy way to explain it, but I assure you, assuming no one terminates by 6/30/18, we will pay just like we have been before we made the 5-day adjustment, in cash out the door. Correct?
That's correct, but you still
I
still have to accrue those salaries.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. We will accrue on paper. We will show more salary expense in our budgeted line items. So, again, 2 CPAs kind of button heads here, but it's.
No, you have to appropriate the money before you can spend it, and it's going to hit this fiscal year. So your salary line items are going to be short because you budget for a full year's salaries, and you're paying an extra 5 days. So for the budget purposes, you do need to appropriate the money, or let the department's overages try to cover it, but there will be $250 less going into the general fund depending on how you look at it.
Correct, but the general fund balance itself will not be affected.
Yes, it will be. You have to appropriate those funds. And if you don't appropriate the funds, if you pull the $250 and just say, okay, we'll see how the budget plays out, that's still $250 less that's going back into the general fund if you let the budget cover it itself. Like, let's say they don't spend $250 in paving and they have $250 over in salaries. Well, it's still $250 less that's going into the general fund.
And that's why I was okay with the ordinance as it stood, and I voted for it. Because in my knowledge, I know we're not actually going to write checks to anyone for money in excess.
But they still earned it in this fiscal
They
year. So
absolutely-
and it has to be appropriated in this fiscal year.
Hold on just a second. Hold on just a second. We're not going to have a debate.
Yes, sir.
Alderman.
I apologize.
If you've got a question, Dana, okay. There we go.
I'm good.
Okay. Alderman Petrelli.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my original question. If we leave the pay dates the same as they are now, does it eliminate this discussion of $250,000? Can anybody answer that?
Do you want to answer it? Or are you saying Dana? Go ahead, Alderman Strauss.
If the purpose of this appropriation is to cover the advance of 5 days, there's no need for the advance of 5 days if we keep someone being paid at the end, on the day that's the end of the pay period. There's no need for that, I would think.
We're keeping the pay dates the same, but right now, our pay periods run from the 12th to the 27th. We're shifting that back because we have to have more time to process the payroll, so we're not guessing those few days again. Like, that's the whole point, is we're shifting the work periods back so we don't guess time. And in order to shift those back, you get the overlap of the 5 days. That gives me more time. Instead of ending on the 11th, it would end on the 6th, which gives me more time to process the payroll for accurate time reporting and still pay on the 15th.
I have one question for Dana.
Go ahead.
Dana, is this adjustment we would have to do, I'm sorry, if we did not appropriate the money tonight, and then as we got towards the end of the budget year, we knew what an actual number was, we would then have to appropriate that.
Yes.
But that would be a one-time occurrence, because then we would be able, in future budget years, be able to build that buffer in.
Well, you wouldn't need the buffer. It would be for a full year. This is just the 1 year where you're doing the extra 5 days.
I appreciate the spirit of saying, let's go ahead and appropriate the $250,000. I think, as with many other things with this issue, there's a lot of emotion attached to it, and emotion can sometimes lead to misunderstanding, and misunderstanding can sometimes lead to an avoidance of the cleanest, easiest way. But if one of the values that we're going to get from doing this, and this is a significant value, is doing away with zero gap between the end of the pay period and when someone gets paid for that period, that's a huge cost savings there. I'm okay with getting a little bit of work if it's a one-time effort, so we can know, instead of appropriating a blanket $250,000, we can appropriate, as we get to the end of the budget year, appropriate something that's closer to the real number. And I think that may take a little bit of the emotion out of it. So, thank you.
I think I still have the floor.
You do.
Okay, sorry. And bear with me, all of you accounting people, because that's just not my thing. I don't understand why if we can't leave the days the same, like why it takes more time. Like I'm not processing that.
Hold on.
Like-
Shirley, go ahead.
Like for right now, let's say we're paying on December 31st, okay? With the holidays and the weekends, I have to have them turn in their time on the 21st when the pay period doesn't actually even end until the 26th. So I'm guessing 6 days of time that they're going to work. And then I have to go back and I have to correct that. So in order to process the payroll, I have to have them approve their time once it's already worked. And then the supervisors have to approve it, review it. They have to get it to payroll. Payroll has to review it. And then we have to submit the file to the bank at least 2 days before the payday. So I have to have more time between the end of the pay period and the actual pay date in order to process actual time.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to hear from representatives from police and fire, what they think, where they're at. I know we're still on this amendment. Do you want to wait till we're past the amendment?
You could ask for that now. We can hear from the chiefs without suspending the rules. We can hear from other folks by suspending the rules. Who would you like to hear from?
Chief Bush? Thank you.
So the way that my mind works, and I'm not sure that I'm accurate with the appropriate folks, is I try to look at it and explain it to my guys. If you have a person that makes $60,000 a year, divide that by 12 months, that's $5,000 a month. So every 2 weeks, if we stay semi-monthly, it's $2,500 every check. Okay, so if we push back 5 days, somebody's going to lose money. And it, obviously, if it's the employees, let's just say it's $300. For that 2 weeks, when we push back 5 days, they're going to lose $300. So $2,200 that first 2 weeks. The second 2 weeks, they're going to make their original $2,500. So I think what they're going back and forth and saying is you guys are giving us that $300 to keep those checks at $2,500. $2,500 the first 2 weeks, $2,500 for the second 2 weeks for the entire month, and that is our guaranteed salaries. And that money's already budgeted for. Now that's how I understand it. That's how I've explained it to my folks. Now, again, if I'm wrong, I'll yield to the accountants. But that's exactly the way that I understand it.
Chief Miller? Thank you, Chief Bush.
The way I understand it is if we continue to make the exact same paycheck on the exact same pay dates, we're in good shape. But we know at the end of that, because we've got to keep that fiscal year the same for the people who may retire during that time period, that we're going to have to come up with that $250,000 either now or before July the 1st. And we all know how tight money is getting toward the end of a budget year. And I'm thinking that we ought to come up with it now. And that's the only way I don't know how else to explain it. I just want to make sure this is not going to, if we went to bi-weekly, it wouldn't affect me, but most of my employees it would affect severely. And that's why I think y'all agreed to try to keep it semi-monthly. But it's you pay it now or later. And if you got the money now, you ought to pay it now. If you got it, if you're going to wait till June when we're arguing over what we're going to do in the budget, we may have a problem. And, the money might not be there. So that's my opinion on it.
Thank you, Chief Miller. Alderman Petrelli?
Thank you.
Alderman Brown?
Well, Why does this have to be so hard? Start saying that every meeting I get. I think it's a good amendment. And the reason I think it's a good amendment is, the second time Mr. Spouse spoke, is if we have to appropriate any more money, we can do that closer to an actual figure in June. We may not have to. We are notorious as a city for 3 to 4% of our budget we don't spend. So we may have to move some money, but I don't know that we'll necessarily have to appropriate any money. But I do know that this has been long, and it seems like it's getting longer, and I'm, for one alderman, ready to end it and make a decision. These folks don't have, unless they just start wanting to come up here on Tuesday night and watch. I don't think they do. You know, getting to know some people better because I'm seeing them more often. But I think it's time we, as a group, make a decision. We can go back and rehash everything we've talked about and why we spent $75,000, and, you know, we didn't know, people's hands were raised, and they agreed to it. We can argue and hash all that out again. But we've got a plan. I think we've got a good amendment. I'm going to support the amendment so we can move on and continue the paydays that are in this ordinance. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Brown, thank you. Alderman Waters.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to be sure I understand what we're talking about. A finance committee recommended option 2, right? I'm talking to you, Mayor. Option 2.
I don't know the answer to that.
Sir?
I don't know the answer to that.
You wasn't here?
I'm not on the finance committee. You should probably ask Alderman Stamper. He's the vice chairman. Go ahead and ask your question. We'll come back to it.
We did.
I asked the question just then. I thought you would address it, but if you don't mind, I'll let my colleague answer it.
We did.
Thank you, Alderman Stamper.
Yes.
They did.
Option 2.
Option 2, and also taking care of any salary gap, right?
Alderman Stamper?
Yes, that's correct.
Which is the $250,000, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So explain to me, because I only went to the 4th grade. I would have went to the 5th grade, but my father was there, so I didn't want to embarrass him. But explain to me why, what am I missing here?
I think I'm prepared to speak
I
one
can't
last
explain
time.
that. Alderman Stamper, go ahead, please.
I think what's happening is, by making this adjustment, our employees are going to see no change to their pay date or the amount they receive at each pay date. But when we make the change, whatever day that turns out to be, for one period, it's going to be a 10-day period. And then the next period will be 15 days, half a month, half a month. That will continue on. But during that one 10-day period, on paper, and reflected in each department's budget, we will have an increased salary expense of 33%, or 15 days roughly that we're paying the employees for on paper. They're not going to see a difference, however, in their pay date. So what we're doing is cleaning it up behind the scenes so that our employees will not recognize any difference from what things are now to what they're going to be. And so all this does, and whether or not it's a $250,000 ordinance that passed, or we amend it just to change, by nature of the change that we're doing and saying that we will make up the difference, it's going to achieve the same goal. So the cash that our folks are receiving will not change with this ordinance. That's the best I can do.
Thank you.
Alderman Stamper, thank you. Alderman Waters, go ahead.
I want to ask the Chief Bush to come back up, if I may. That's all you want to hear. I'm going to ask you, Chief, do you understand what they're doing?
Yes, sir. I certainly believe so. And again, we can go back in the past. If we've had people retire unexpectedly, we've had to come back and ask for that money to be moved to our budgets.
Absolutely.
And that's happened.
Yeah.
I mean, if a person decides to retire, we can't prevent that. Now, whether you put the money in now, like Chief Miller was saying, for it to already be there, so we don't have this discussion come June, that's a decision you guys got to make. We, I think, as I speak for the fire department, want to stay on semi-monthly, push the 5 days back. According to these folks, we're going to get an advance on paper for 5 days, so our money will not change. We're going to make the same amount that we're guaranteed in our salary for the year. The only time that you'll have to pay that out is when somebody leaves, retires, quits, or is terminated. And that's when they will get paid that money. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I don't.
Well,
I did study a little accounting in high school and a little bit in college. Wasn't my favorite subject, but
well, you went further than I did, didn't you? But Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
are we going to vote on option 2, which includes a $250,000 salary cap for the? That's all I want to know.
Well, this amendment is to remove the $250,000, so it's option 2 amended. Is that a good way to put it, Alderman Stamper?
No.
I'm not sure for Alderman Waters to understand that that's the good way to put it.
Okay. So this amendment is removing the $250,000.
I yield back, Mayor,
Okay, I appreciate that.
before I have to shoot him.
All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye when Kay calls your name. Those opposed, please say no.
Brown?
We're voting on the amendment.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
Campbell?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
Hedberg?
Yes.
Gilly?
Yes.
Petrelli? Yes. Skidmore?
No.
Sprouse?
Yes.
Stamper?
Yes.
Waters?
No.
Woodcock?
Yes.
Clary?
Yes. That passed.
It's not right, it's too late.
That passes by a vote of 10-2. We're back on the main motion. Alderman Petrelli.
I think she already talked about it.
Well, she wasn't supposed to do that.
I apologize. I'm not trying to say that.
Okay. I want to bring up something here. We still have this issue of, follow me here, that the software that we've asked to be designed has been designed for bi-weekly. If we go back, or if we, or you may look at it as if we stay with semi-monthly, it's going to cost us approximately $25,000 for our vendor to go back in and reprogram all of this. I mean, just imagine the fact that they've been working on this for 5 months. There's an awful lot of work that's going into it. And that was ready to be started, actually, about right now. So to back up, start that all over, it's $25,000 that it's going to cost us. We're sort of in the same situation. We can pay it now, we can pay it later, but we absolutely know that it's going to cost around $25,000. There's going to be a cost there. Alderman Petrelli.
Again, not to beat a dead horse, but I have concerns about the whole system. I would like for someone from, is it Executime? Is that the name of the company? Yes. Mm-hmm. I would like for a consultant from Executime to come talk to us. Mm-hmm. I'd like to understand why it's going to cost an additional $25,000 when this program was first started working on in March 2015. So we spent $75, and now it's going to be $25. Again, I'm not an IT person, I'm not an accounting person, but $25,000 to manipulate a system, that the whole reason why we're going is to make our systems easier and more user-friendly and all this stuff, that we can't quickly make the system be what we need it to be, does not make sense to me. And if the system is not easily manipulatable to what the city needs, at what point do we cut bait and say, well, let's just go with a new system that works? It's kind of like being penny wise and pound foolish. Yeah, we can spend $100,000 and we got a Pinto, or we spend $250,000 and we've got a Jaguar for a system that meets the city's needs going into the future. Because how long do you plan to use this system? How often does it update?
Daily. They'll be clocking in and clocking out daily with the system. There's nothing wrong with the system, and it can do.
Hey, Dana, come on up here, please.
Sorry.
Sorry. The system is a good system. It's just
We're not
that we
being
designed it
25
to
grand,
run
that was just a
bi-weekly.
comment.
And the system, everything is
No, that's
based
fine.
off of those pay dates or those work periods. All the rules that go with our overtime rules, everything is based on those work periods. So you basically have to strip down the system, redo the work periods again to a semi-monthly period, which creates different rules for the system, and then you have to build it back up, which means you have to put all the employees in, then you have to get them hooked up to the departments again, then you have to, test it, make sure the overtime is working correctly. So it's just, it's stripping it down and then rebuilding it back up again. That's what is gonna take some time to do.
That just astounds me that it's that laborious, that in today's day and age, a system which is designed for accounting and payroll is that difficult to manipulate.
Peg, is it okay if I come up?
Yes, ma'am.
Hold on, we have to suspend rules for Mary Beth. All those in favor of suspending rules?
Aye.
Those opposed, say no.
No.
Hold on. Please call the roll. All those, first we have to have a motion to suspend the rules for Mary Beth to answer questions. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of suspending the rules to allow Mary Beth to speak, please signify by saying aye when Kay calls your name.
Brown,
No.
Campbell,
Yes.
Cross,
Yes.
Hedberg. Yes. Gilly,
Yes.
Petrelli,
Yes.
Skidmore,
Yes.
Sprouse,
Yes.
Stamper,
Yes.
Waters,
No.
Woodcock,
He's gone.
He's gone.
Bathroom.
I think he's gone back.
Clary.
Aye. That passes. Mary Beth, come on up, please. Alderman Petrelli.
As far as this system goes, it's, the overtime calculations are the hardest. When you go bi-weekly, it's a 40-hour work week, Saturday to Saturday. It's pretty, it's neat, overtime's easy. When you stay semi-monthly, and the 7th falls on a Tuesday, and you're paying until the 21st, you've got a couple days from the previous work period that counts to overtime to the current work period, because your overtime calculations are still Saturday to Saturday. It complicates things. And you have to, we're going to have to do what Dana said, erase the database that we've got now, copy everything back in. There's a lot of different employees that have different classes, police 82 and a half hours, city hall 40 hours, or 42 and a half for police, 40 hours for city hall, the 27-day period for fire. There's a lot of different groupings of employees that we have to, I'm literally selecting which employees are police officers to set them up initially. It's a lot of work. Setting up those rules for those hours, for those days, because I can't guarantee the 7th is always going to start on a Tuesday. I can't guarantee it's going to, there's holidays, there's a lot of schedules that need to be built. An 8-hour day for city hall is an 8.5-hour day for a police officer. All those overtime rules with those hours, the holiday schedules, there's a lot of things that go into it. It's not as easy as you think. If it was 40 hours, yes, I would agree. You know, if you're going from a 40-hour week to an 80-hour week, that would have been easy. This one's not easy.
Okay, and so a representative from ExecuTime is going to rebuild it, or you're going to rebuild it?
ExecuTime is going to build it. I'm going to help because they don't know who the police officers are that need to be on 42 and a half and which ones aren't.
Okay. And they're going to do that remotely, or they're going to like be here working?
Most of the work that we've done has
remote.
been remote. Mhm.
Okay. All
And
right.
with that is, There's training that we've had already. We've trained all our staff.
Hold on. Any other questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Mary Beth? Alderman Strauss, go ahead.
I can understand in writing system, in developing a system and in writing code that you build layer upon layer and layer. And it's something as simple as if I'm putting together a piece of furniture and it's a 47-step process, and I realize as I get closer to the end that I put part B where I should have put part C. Sometimes I have to undo work, put it back together, and build it over again. But what really surprises me by some of the things I'm hearing tonight, and I've really limited my comments about the system because I've trusted the system staff to make decisions about the system once the money was appropriated, is I'm concerned that variables like pay period are written in the code, and it's really not more of a user-defined variable after the fact. I would have thought that if we were buying a system that it would have the ability for user-defined variables like the pay date, and it wouldn't require rewriting code or redeveloping the system. And then I'm especially concerned if we have to engage the vendor to define the status of an employee and how they're going to be paid. Are we going to be in that type of situation as we add and move and change employees? Are they going to have to be engaged down the road if someone switches from one job in the police department and decides they're going to become a codes official? Or is that something we're going to be able to do in-house, or are we going to have to engage the vendor to do that?
Those two separate questions that you
Okay.
asked there, Scott. The first question, there's no programming changes per se that need to be done. It's all, when I say programming, I don't mean code. It's, you have to go into the work periods and define it and then attach those employees to those work periods. There's screens that you have to follow. It's not programming, but they're tedious screens and they're critical screens, because if you screw one of them up, people are getting paid wrong, and you want to make sure that that doesn't happen. The second part to that, yes, when employees come on, the employees' information is going to come into ExecuTime automatically, which it is a Tyler product now. Tyler did buy them, which Tyler is a product that has our HR payroll system. So those two are going to integrate more as we go further. The Tyler ExecuTime product brings the employees in from the Munis system, but there's extra rules for different groups of employees, police officers, firefighters, based on the hours that they work. Those will have to be maintained in the timekeeping front end as new employees come on board. Each one will have to have, not every single one will have a tweak, but there'll be some tweaks for some of them.
Are those tweaks done in-house, or do we have?
Oh, no, we'll do them in-house, yeah. And not even me, it'll be the appropriate department staff that does them.
Thank you, Alderman Sprouse. Thank you, Mary Beth.
You're welcome.
Alderman Brown.
Just one question. If we wanted to have a representative from ExecuTime come up here, is that possible?
I'm
not
pretty sure it is.
Address you.
Absolutely.
Yep.
We would, I don't want to say, I don't know if there's going to be a cost involved. If we did like a WebEx, there might not be. I just don't know, because they're not local.
We'll find a way for it to happen next. If you wanted to further
Yeah,
this.
I think the consensus probably be on this board that we would feel more comfortable going into this if we talk to ExecuTime executive.
Okay. We have a motion to defer. You want to give a bit of timeline on that? Or a time on that?
A motion to defer.
For 30 days, 60 days?
No, I don't want to put this in the ordinance.
Okay.
I'm just asking a question if that could happen.
Okay.
I want to vote on this ordinance tonight.
Okay.
I don't want to defer anything.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion to defer. Again, we're still talking about some money, and if I haven't heard anybody willing to put the $25,000 in there. So I feel like we need to get some answers before we go forward with this. Or we stick with bi-weekly. I mean, we're saying don't go with bi-weekly, but we're not saying that we're willing to pay for it. And it's going to cost us some money to do that. So I'll make that motion that we defer this for 30 days. That fails for lack of a second. We're back to the main motion and nobody in the queue. Okay. All those in favor, when Kay calls your name, please signify by saying aye for ordinance 2017-35 as amended.
We discussed, we repeat what the amended motion says.
Just on page 13, scratch out the last paragraph, be it further ordained, down to the end of January 2018. We've taken that out. Alderman Petrelli.
Point of information, on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whereas down, it says the city desires to fund 5 additional days. Do we need to not remove that also?
That wasn't part of the amendment.
If it's necessary, I'll offer that.
This is what I'm looking at. Does that need to come out?
Okay, hold on. So we have an amendment from Alderman Sprouse,
Does that need to
seconded.
come out?
Do we have a second to remove the fifth whereas?
Yes, it does. It's going to. We'll do it.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes, second.
Thank you. Alderman Stamper.
Can you restate the amendment, please, sir? I'm sorry.
The amendment is to remove the fifth whereas.
The city desires to fund 5 additional days of employee compensation. I think that's the whole heart of what we're doing.
You take that out, you messed up the whole thing.
Alderman Petrelli, you have the floor.
On the amendment, who proposed the amendment? Scott?
Alderman Sprouse, seconded by Alderman Stamper.
So you were taking out this portion, correct, Scott?
Yeah, go ahead.
The intent of the amendment is to keep the mechanism in place.
Yeah, it's my fault.
The intent of the amendment is to keep the mechanism in place to where we're doing is lawnmower man down there said, can't use names, said, it's late. The 5-day advance, it's still going to be there. So I think that if we were to remove that, it would take away the mechanism, which what we're really wanting to do is just to take away the funding where we're saying $250,000. The $250,000 appropriation is not needed at this time to cover the action of the 5-day advance. There may be a period as we enter into the budget period, as we near the end of the budget year, where we may need a portion of that could be identified. It's not covered by overages and other portions of the budget, but we will address that at that time with an actual number. So I think the original amendment to remove only the last paragraph would be appropriate. I'm going to leave that to staff to determine if my intent is going to be covered with that type of an amendment, the way it's phrased. If the intent is to keep the mechanism without keeping the $250,000 appropriation, what phrasing accomplishes that?
I withdraw my question.
Okay. That's probably a question for you, John.
If you want to make sure that people are paid and not shorted in their check in January, you've got to have language in here that says you're paying them. Because otherwise, if you just have the one paragraph, it says the pay period changes. How can they possibly pay for 15 days when they've only worked 10?
Well, I'll stay with the original amendment.
Well, but then it does need to be a whereas, because a whereas is not really a part of the ordinance. That just leads into it. So you need to now say, be it further ordained, instead of whereas up here, the city will fund 5 additional days for employee compensation as a payroll adjustment to avoid reduced paychecks on the first payday in 2018.
Thank you, John.
It has to be funded.
So help us out. The original amendment was just take out this portion down here.
The second,
Hold on.
what we're doing, if someone wants to make this amendment, where it says, be it further ordained that the board desires to fund, that the board will fund,
Okay.
be it further ordained that the board will fund 5 additional days of employee compensation as a payroll adjustment to avoid reduced paychecks on the first payday in 2018. That's the second paragraph, and then you don't need the whereas up there.
Gotcha.
Delete the whereas and change that second paragraph to what I just said, if someone wants to make that motion.
I'll make that motion.
Motion is second. Go ahead.
Be it further ordained that the board will fund 5 additional days of employee compensation as a payroll adjustment, the stamper adjustment, to avoid reduced paychecks on the first payday in 2018. Except take out the part about the stamper adjustment.
We got that, we got that.
Turn me with humor.
Well, he said it all night. You got what we're doing, right?
Yeah, I got you. Okay. Alderman Stamper.
This comes here. Yes, I support this amendment. This does clarify that we are going to fund it. I think we need to say just what our attorney said. That is our intention. Like I said, we're not trying to, hide anything. We're willing to pay 5 extra days or front 5 extra days. So I support the amendment. I hope that passes, and then the main motion, I hope that passes as well. That's all I have.
All those in favor of this amendment, please signify by saying aye when Kay calls your name. Those opposed, say no.
Brown,
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Frost,
Yes.
Hedberg,
Aye.
Gilly,
Aye.
Petrelli,
Aye.
Skidmore,
Aye.
Sprouse,
Aye.
Stamper,
Aye.
Waters,
Aye.
Woodcock,
Aye.
Clary.
Aye. That passed unanimously. We have a motion to call the question on the main motion. We have nobody else in the queue. Thank you. All those in favor of accepting ordinance 2017-35 as amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. No. Next on the agenda is the first item. Second reading of ordinance 2017-26. This is ordinance amending ordinance 2017-23 by increasing the funding of the city share for the Caps Gap landfill closure. I so move. The motion is second. All those in favor of accepting second reading of ordinance 2017-26, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Item B has been withdrawn. Item C, this is second reading of ordinance 2017-29, ordinance appropriating funds for the feasibility study regarding impact fees for development of Hendersonville. I so move. Second. We have a second.
Everybody's second.
All those in favor of accepting second reading of ordinance 2017-29, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That passed unanimously. Now we have item E. We've already dispensed of item D. First reading of ordinance 2017-30. This is an ordinance to annex into the city of Hendersonville, Tennessee, Eagle View subdivision, located on the east side of New Shackle Island Road, south of Callis Road. Alderman Petrelli.
So moved.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of accepting first reading of ordinance 2017-30 signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Next, we have first reading of ordinance 2017-31. This is an ordinance rezoning the property located at the south side of Volunteer Drive, east of Tennessee Way. Alderman Petrelli. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Alderman Brown.
Mr. Free, please. Hope this is a positive question and doesn't lead to a lot of discussion.
Go ahead, Alderman Brown.
Yes. We want to build they want to build a chiropractor office over here?
That's correct, yes. I think physical therapy, chiropractor office is what
Okay.
they're looking at.
We'll be actually changing this one and the one following it for an office as well, both on Volunteer Drive.
Yeah, the other one is actually, it's already sort of general commercial.
Yeah.
And the uses are, and it's just putting it more in line with what it is.
Okay. You're good with both these, I'm
Yes.
assuming?
Yes.
Actually, it's probably an enhancement for.
Yes, both of
for around the
these.
expo center and stuff.
Yeah,
Okay,
both of
thank-
these are approved. Thank you.
Well, we'll go ahead, Pat, don't go anywhere. Please.
Alderman Brown, thank you. All those in favor of accepting first reading of ordinance 2017-31, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. That passes unanimously. Now we have first reading of ordinance 2017-32. This is an ordinance rezoning the property located on the north and south sides of Industrial Park Drive, west of New Shackle Island Road. Alderman Petrelli? We have a second. We have a motion and a second. Alderman Brown?
Let me answer my question for both of them when he,
Okay,
yeah,
great, thank you.
but I do have another question.
On this?
Water tower.
Oh, we'll get there. Okay. All those in favor of accepting first reading of ordinance 2017-32, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Next, we have first reading of ordinance 2017-34. This is an ordinance rezoning Forest Park. Good to hear. Next, we have reading of resolution 2017-30, a resolution to approve a final development plan for Indian Lake Village Phase 5A Water Tower. Alderman Petrelli. We have a motion and a second. Alderman Brown?
I have a question. Talk to me about a water tower, how that's going to look. Big, 9 feet tall.
Keith Free, go ahead.
Yeah, everybody kind of has a rendering of that, or not a rendering, actually a drawing. It's about in excess of 110 feet tall, and I think it's about 31 feet, 44, it's more than that, about 81 foot tall at the top, so it's a pretty big water tower that will be going up at that location.
I guess my questions are, is this automatic? We've got to do this? Who's this going to service? I know we've been here a long time, but it's not midnight. So.
Yeah, this is something where this is the Hendersonville HUD, Hendersonville Utility District, and their utility district. So they need to go through our process. At the end of the day, they could do what they want, but this is a part of them going through this process.
We appreciate them working with us and working with our fire department and with our planning department.
Yeah, and I think we've got all the issues that we had with it resolved, but it is a pretty big tower.
Well, I don't know how you make I've heard put lipstick on a pig tonight. I don't know that, probably a pig, and I don't know how you put lipstick on it, but.
John Deere cream.
Thanks, that's all.
Alderman Hedberg?
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question about what goes on there. I'm looking at the drawing now. It says that the logo for the Hendersonville Utility District.
Right.
So is that the only logo that can go on that? Can we put our Hendersonville
Hold
City
on,
by
y'all,
the
this is
Lake
important.
logo on the other side, or
No,
what's the thing with that?
This would be the Hendersonville Utility District, I guess, would determine that. I think there was something in a deal with the land years ago when they secured the property that this Indian Lake Village logo goes on there at some location.
We can't change that.
Yeah.
We can't?
We can't, unless we want to buy the water tower.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So that evidently that
didn't
logo
realize
that's going
that.
on there from Indian Lake Village had something to do with when they secured the property a few years ago, to put that was part of the requirement to put that on
It's
there.
unique, but we can't change it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you very
Mayor.
much.
Thank you, Keith. Alderman Sprouse, thank you. Alderman Hedberg.
Just real quick, months and months ago, Mr. Hale approached me about that, the question about the design. He is considering something to be landmark because he has issues and concerns and makes things as well as the classic. Someone's not going to put something ugly in their own front yard. So I appreciate him approaching that with the idea for the design. So I think this is really just a placeholder.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Sprouse. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
All those in favor of accepting Resolution 2017-30, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Alderman Woodcock? Anyone else? That passes 11-1. Did you get that? Okay. Next, we have reading of Resolution 2017-32. This is a resolution to clarify the calculation of years of city service for retiree health insurance benefits. I so move. We have a motion and a second.
We get an explanation on that.
Sure. We don't necessarily need to do it because it's been in practice, and we do not have the word continuous service in our ordinance right now. So if somebody leaves and they come back, their retiree benefits are based on total service. but we'd like to put it in the ordinance to make sure that it's not an interpretation that somebody decides to change later on. All those in favor of accepting Resolution 2017-32, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Next we have, thank you, Resolution 2017-33. This is a resolution authorizing the transfer of $150,000 from disposal service tipping fees to that line item budget to a new line item budget titled Pilot Recycling Program within the disposal service of the Disposal to Service Department. And you've got that resolution in front of you. Alderman Skidmore?
Yes, so moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Alderman Woodcock?
Very quick question. The $150,000, I assume, is going to pay the $15 per home per month fee, right?
We don't know how much it'll cost at this point. We're still taking bids on how that's going to be handled.
It's estimated to be $15, and that's what it's going to cover?
It's going to cover that, the pickup, and yeah, it's going to cover the pickup. There will be no tipping fee associated with recycling.
Okay, and so, 818. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
You got it.
All those in favor of accepting Resolution 2017-33, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no.
Thank you, board members, for
That
that.
passes unanimously. We have a motion to adjourn and a second. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
I guess Clary's chairman of Public Works, too. I said that out loud.